IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Friday. That means it is the Friday free for all mailbag. You guys are stuck with just me today. So we have obviously a lot of guys working. We've got guys with problems with their babies, so they got to take care of their babies. So it is just me today, but I am ready to rock and roll. Got Ryan on the back end producing the show today. So I'm ready to rock and roll, man. It is Ohio State week, y'all. It is Ohio State week, and it is time to rock and roll. Man, I'm fired up. I don't know if y'all are fired up about this or not. I am. I'm fired up about the tailgate tomorrow. We should be getting started around 1 o'clock tomorrow in the stadium lot. Not sure exactly where. It's one of those sort of, we know it's going to be in the stadium lot, but it's a first come, first serve type thing. So what I'll do tomorrow is I will go through or I will go out once we get settled. I will tweet where we're going to be, and we'll also then go in and put it on the message board and let all of you all know where we'll be tomorrow. So it'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Gonna be I don't say stressful day because it's not stressful because I mean it's not like I'm not coaching in it or playing with it or anything like that in it and anything like that. But just as a fan, as an analyst, it's just kind of man, I just really want to see what this team is about. Are they as good as I think they can be, or is they as good as they should be? Can they really win this kind of game? I was texting with a guy or a DM, and the guy DMs me on Twitter today. He's like, "Man, I'm so nervous about this game." And I was like, "Man, I kind of feel you because when I break the game down and I study the film and I do all that, it's like, man, Notre Dame should win this game, right? I mean, I think they're the better team." But then, as I told him, man, my BK PTSD starts creeping in, and you're like, man, this isn't a game that Notre Dame has won in a long time. This kind of big game, especially against a team like Ohio State. If you're my age, or I mean, gosh, unless you're what in your 90s or 100s, you've never seen Notre Dame beat Ohio State in the game. So there's that too. So we'll kind of get to that. But man, I'm really fired up about what we got going on and what this team is going to be. But look, here's the deal. Tomorrow by, no later than midnight, I would imagine 11:30 at the latest, actually, we're going to know who this Notre Dame team is. We really are. And it's not going to define them necessarily the rest of the year, but it's going to tell us who they are now and whether they need to build on what we saw because it was a good performance and they got a W, or if it's okay, they've come here, but they're not there yet. This is what's needed moving forward. And that's what we're going to find out for tomorrow. So that's what I'm excited about. We got some questions in here. Now, go ahead and throw your mailbag questions in. We'll talk Notre Dame versus Ohio State. We'll talk Notre Dame if you just got general Notre Dame questions, if you've got recruiting questions, if you've got college football questions, whatever the case may be. We're ready to rock and roll. So let's go ahead and get started. First question is going to be from Tyler Eric. He said, in last year's game, I felt like there was a lot of delayed interior blitzes from the linebackers that got home for Ohio State. How do you try and combat this, and how worried are you about the interior offensive line this year? Tyler, we talked about this early in the week, and we talked about in the offseason, like this was a major problem for Notre Dame last year. Ohio State's delayed pressures, and some of it wasn't delayed pressure. It looked like it, but what Ohio State also does is they'll bring some like long twists from their linebackers, so they'll like crash aside really hard with their line and then bring their linebackers on longer loops. So it's not so much a delayed blitz as much as it's just the timing of it's a little longer, trying to get through with that front wave and then bring that other guy around. So they do that as well. So those two things kind of both were successful last year. And it can look like a delayed blitz, but really what it comes down to, Tyler, is there's several things you've got to do. You need great communication by your interior offensive line. You need your quarterback to be aware of who they can and cannot block, because in some of these pressures, a guy's going to come free. If you've got 6 blockers and they bring 7, somebody's coming free. If you've got 5 blockers because you're doing a free release where your back is out and your tight end is out, and they bring 6, you can't pick somebody up. If you have the right numbers, 6 on 6, but they're overloading to a side, you understand the protection is, hey, we've got 6 on 6, but we can only block 3 to this side. They may bring 4 to that side. I got to know who I'm throwing hot off of or who I need to avoid or whatever the case may be. So it also requires your quarterback to be on top of his game as well. It requires a pass game that can come out and have some stuff built in to where if those pressures come, you make them pay for it. I mean, those are different aspects of it as well. So there's a lot of different things that Notre Dame should do. One aspect that I think this year's pass game gives them a little bit more. It's not better or worse. It's just different matching up against Ohio State. There's a lot more high lows built into the offense, where Notre Dame last year seemed to be a lot more of a horizontal stretch type of team, and those are good concepts. They work. Some of the layered stuff, some of the high low stuff was more perimeter oriented, and this year there seems to be a lot more over the middle stuff, whether it's play side high lows on top of each other, high lows coming from opposite directions, a lot of different things that Notre Dame is doing that protect the middle of the field, or not protect the middle of the field, but attack the middle of the field. And those things can be very effective against these type of pressures if your quarterback's making good reads, if guys have an understanding of, hey, you got to hustle over here, you got to get to this open spot, or you got to settle down in this open spot. Those are all things that are going to require you to play at a high level. And that's the key to beating Ohio State. And what Michigan has mastered the last 2 years, a lot of people ask, what can Notre Dame do to be like Michigan and do what Michigan can do? And I don't really prescribe to that. I don't think it's so much about, be like Michigan, but it's more about, do what you do. And what you do is Notre Dame is a physical football team. They're a team that wants to go out there and beat you up in the trenches. They're a team that wants to go out there and get the run game going and attack vertically and all that. And you've got to be able to do what you do successfully. You've got to play at a high level. You've got to be efficient. You've got to be able to generate big plays. And you've got to protect the football. And that's something that Michigan did a great job of against Ohio State the last 2 years. I mean, if you look at Michigan's yards per play against Ohio State the last 2 years, they were 8 yards a play in 2021. And they were 8.8 yards a play last year. That's a combination of two things. They were able to generate big plays. And the other part of it is they were super efficient on the other plays. They were great on first down. They were able to establish the run game. Even when they weren't gashing Michigan early last year, they were still able to move the chains and keep Ohio State's offense on the field, and they were able to put some drives together, which then set up the big play opportunities that came later in the game that really broke that game open. And they were able to get big plays in 2021 as well. Not like they did last year, but they were able to do that. And so, I mean, if you look at the last 2 years and look at Michigan beating Ohio State, I mean, it was a 14-13 game at halftime in 2021, which Michigan led, and then they poured it on in the third quarter. It was a 20-17, I believe 20-17 game last year that Ohio State led, and then Michigan came out and poured it on in the second half. And so one thing that Michigan was able to do is they were able to establish an efficient attack that allowed their offense to stay on the field. It allowed them to get points. It allowed them to, like I said, stay in the game, make some early stops on defense, and allow your offense to keep it a game. And then you get in there at halftime. You've gotten used to the speed of the game. You've gotten used to Ohio State's tempo. You've done all those kind of things. And then the second half, you out there and you make those adjustments and you put it on them. And that's what we've seen from Ohio State in some of these big games. I mean, if you look at, I'm going to pull it up right now and just give you some numbers to back up what I'm saying here. So just give me 1 second to pull that up. So I get the 2021 box score, and then I'm going to pull up the Georgia box score from last year and just give you guys some examples of what I'm talking about here to prove my point. So last year, or 2021, Michigan outscored Ohio State 28-14 in the second half. It was a 14-13 game at halftime. And then you look at 2022 Ohio State Michigan. It was a 20-17 Ohio State lead in the first half. Michigan outscored them 28-3 in the second half. Last year, Ohio State had a 28-24 lead over Georgia at halftime. It was a 38-24 lead going to the fourth quarter. Georgia outscored them 18-3 in the fourth quarter. So what's happened is you got to keep it close early. Don't let Ohio State overwhelm you. Don't let them jump on you. Don't let them get out to this big lead that takes you out of your game. What Michigan was able to do in the last 2 years is stay on schedule, stay in phase. Don't let them get those big early scores. Don't let them jump out at you. Get some early stops, establish your ground attack. And then when those big play opportunities come, you take them. And then when you do those things, it limits their ability to pressure you and attack you. Because when Ohio State gets up big, if you can't run the football, that's what killed Notre Dame last year. If they know you can't run the football, then they're going to really heat you up. They're, that's what hurt Notre Dame. They realized very early they can't run on us. They have to throw on us. And so they were able to pin their ears back and come at Notre Dame a lot more than they would have if Notre Dame was able to come out and establish the ground attack. So those are just all phases of it that come into, some directly, some indirectly, that are going to go a long way towards attacking that part of the game and being able to slow down that Ohio State offense, which is going to be key to being able to go after defense. I mean, it may sound strange that you're talking about their offense. Yeah, because the more the game is balanced, the more that you can stay on schedule, the more you can go at their pressures. If they're jumping on you big and, look, you can't shorten the game if you're down 17. You've got to kind of go. And if you're able to keep it on schedule, hey, we're either leading or we're only down a possession, we can stay within what we want to do. And we don't have to change who we want to be. And that's a big key to allowing your offense to go out there and be successful and move the football and score. Pete Weber says, anyone else feel like ESPN laid a dud picking Vince Vaughn as the guest? I mean, it's the biggest home game in 30 years, flying the freaking Pope pass. Who would you pick if you had that decision? I don't care. I've got no problem with Vince Vaughn. I mean, Pete, I don't know how old you are, but this is probably a generational thing. People are talking about, bringing Shane Gillis on. I have no clue who Shane Gillis is. Now, would I be upset if they pick Shane Gillis? No, I don't. I really don't care. I just wanted to be a Notre Dame fan or a former Notre Dame player, and I was actually kind of glad they went with Vince Vaughn. I was worried they were going to kind of, bring in a player or something like that, which that's great. I mean, but, kind of we know who the players are. To bring in like a celebrity and, supposed to be a celebrity guest picker and all that. Well, Vince Vaughn's a pretty avid Notre Dame fan. I mean, he was in Rudy, which I know some people don't like. I don't care. He was in Rudy. It's pretty cool. He went to a Notre Dame game in one of his other movies, right? He's talked about being a Notre Dame fan in movies. He's been at Notre Dame games. So guy's a Notre Dame fan. I mean, if you were famous and you were a Notre Dame fan, wouldn't you think it was pretty cool to be a celebrity guest picker at ESPN? I would. And I don't even like ESPN, but if they wanted me to be on that, heck yeah, I would do that, right? I'm not a celebrity, but you get the point. So I don't think it's a dud at all. I think Vince Vaughn is pretty funny. Some of his movies I really like, but he's been very open about being a Notre Dame fan. So I would have I have no problem with Vince Vaughn being the celebrity picker. I think it's kind of cool. But again, he's more of my generation than he is, I would imagine some of you younger folks who aren't big fans of this decision for whatever reason. But no, I kind of like it. I kind of like it. John A1 says, how important will it be for the second unit on the defensive line to be impactful in this matchup? Will this be a max snap game for the starters, or maybe a better way to ask, will the depth matter? John, I think the depth matters a ton in this game. I do. It can't be a max volume type of deal for your defensive lineman. Like at corner, am I taking Benjamin Morrison off the field? Probably not. Am I taking Cam Hart off the field? Rather not. Am I taking Xavier Watts off the field? I'd rather not. I don't care about rotating linebackers. I don't care about getting my second string linebackers in the game. I want JD Bertrand on the field every snap. I don't care about playing 9 receivers in this game. None of that matters to me. But when it comes to the trenches on defense, when it comes to running back, positions where you can wear down more over the course of the game, that matters more to me. That's point one. And part of the reason for that is I want my big boys fresh at the end of the game. So if you go into the fourth quarter, Ohio State's run, let's say 50 snaps, right? Last 2 drives of the game, and their offensive line has played 50 physical snaps. I mean, you're getting after it. Your starters are giving them a hard time. Your backups are giving them a hard time. You go into that last series, you're up 3. You've got to get a stop. Last couple series, you've got to get some stops to win this game. And their left tackle and right tackle have 50 snaps under their belt. And Jordan Botelho's got 25, 30. He didn't play the previous series. Guess what? Jordan Botelho is going to be really fresh on that series compared to where he would be if he had 45 or 40 or 50 snaps under his belt. Same with Howard Cross. Same with Riley Mills. Same with Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And so to me, it's about fresh legs. Now, to your point, John, you can't take Batelho and Mills and Cross off the field if for 15, 20 snaps, 25 snaps, if there's a big drop off between your first and second team D line. So to your point, that's why the second team is incredibly important for both teams. For both teams. I mean, what I'm curious about with Notre Dame is how do they mix and match it? That's something I'm very curious about. At times, the last couple years, this was true, actually, really last 3 years, including this year. This happened in 2021 at times, and Marcus Freeman was the D coordinator. It happened a lot more last year when Al Golden was the defensive coordinator. And we've seen it at times this year where they'll like make a mass substitution. Either three of the four defensive linemen on the field is a starter or is a non-starter. Boy, that can work if you love your second team, right? Like if you've got a young guy that's really disruptive, he's just not ready for a full-time workload, but that can work a little bit. But if there's like a big drop off across the board when you got that group in, you're going to be in trouble. And if you go back and look at last year, there was a lot of games where you could put scoring drives together and be like, they started that series off with the entire backup defensive line. That's unfair to those guys. So is it going to be where Howard Cross is on the field a lot with Gabriel Rubio or Jason Onye, whoever the number 2-3 is? Is Riley Mills going to be on the field a lot with, Jason Onye or Gabriel Rubio, whoever the number, because like Rubio and Onye can play both spots. They've both been listed as backup nose guards at different times. Is that going to be the mix and match that we see after the first series or two? I be curious to see that. Is Batelho going to be on the field with Javonte Jean-Baptiste a lot, and then maybe they put Nana in with the other guys? Is it the other way around? A lot of that stuff matters. How do you mix and match that defensive line rotation to keep guys fresh, but then also make sure you're not going out there without your a defensive line capable of holding up at the point of attack in the run game. That's going to not be disciplined when they're attacking. That's going to turn run lanes loose. Because what you can't have is your defensive line is great. You put the backups in, and then boom, 40-yard gain because some young guy missed a gap. Can't have that. They've got to be able to play at a high level. So how impactful they are is important. But to me, I just need them to do their job, not make the big mistakes. And then anything you get from the backups from an impact standpoint, a sack, a tackle for loss, that's gravy. That's really gravy. I mean, obviously that's how you can win some of these football games. But the key number one is how do you kind of mix up that group? Who do you play together? And then can they play disciplined football when they're on the field? That's going to be an important part of this game, John. Very important part of this game. Next question is from John A1 also. Which part of the defense do you expect Ohio State will try to attack and expose the most? Twofold. Number one is I fully expect Ohio State. There's two parts of the defense and then one part of the field I expect them to attack, and that goes with along the lines a little bit with one of the position groups I think they're going to go after. Number one, they're going to attack the edges, partly because Notre Dame's defensive ends have not been super, super impactful this year. They've been good. They just haven't been dynamic. There's not a Foskey from 2021 on the D-line so far this year. Jordan Botelho has actually been a better run blocker this year than he's been a run defender than he's been a pass rusher so far this year. But that's also who Ohio State is. I mean, that's kind of what they do. They're a stretch run game team. They're a misdirection, slam down, get outside type of team. They're going to run jets. They're going to run verses. They're going to run outside zone, stretch play, stuff like that, in attempt to either seal the edge and get their speed outside, or B, stretch it, and then a run lane opens up because somebody doesn't secure a gap, boom, and you get vertical. So they're going to try to attack the edge in that regard because that's just who they are. The second thing, I fully expect them to go after the Notre Dame safety some way, somehow. I will not be surprised at all if we see Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Egbuka spending a lot of time in the slot early in this game in hopes of getting them matched up against Thomas Harper. It's been pretty good, but he's not as good as Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison. And then also what that does in the slot is a lot of your vertical stuff, you're going after safeties. And so I can easily, I expect that. I expect to see that. I also think what that's going to do is because Notre Dame is going to run a lot of what I anticipate running a lot of, those inside pressures we've seen so much in recent games, that also gets Harrison and Egbuka a lot closer to the middle of the field on quick stuff, slants, crossers, unders. You can use Harrison if you're going to put him in the slot, for example. Or actually, really, it's Harrison or Emeka Egbuka, because they're both excellent. But put them in the slot, run them vertical. Maybe Notre Dame overreacts to it, and then you bring Xavier Johnson or the other one of those studs, or Julian Fleming or something like that underneath. Maybe you run them vertical and you put it back on an angle route, and you catch Notre Dame. Notre Dame makes a mistake, and you hit that angle route right behind the D line, and the linebackers that have blitzed, your safeties don't get down, and boom, you're hitting Travion Henderson or Chip Tranum and Mayan Williams for a big gain, or you're doing a delay angle, delay release by your tight end, doing the same exact thing. So that middle of the field is going to be a big part of where I think Ohio State's going to attack. They like to attack vertically, like for width with their run game, edges, edges, edges. And then they like to get you over the middle with their pass game. Now, they'll attack the outside of their pass game. I'm not saying they don't, but that's how they like to do it, is perimeter stretch run game with the occasional inside stuff, but then attack the middle of the field with their pass game with the occasional outside stuff. That's who Ohio State is. And you have to be prepared for it. And that kind of matches up well with what you could perceive to be Notre Dame's weakness this season, which is safety play. At times, the safety play has been pretty good. At times, it's been sloppy. At times, it's been vulnerable to the pass game. And so they're going to have to be on top of their game. You're going to need a big game from the safeties. That's why when I had my midweek rundown on Wednesday, John, I talked about how, the guys that got to really step up. I talked about Riley Mills and Jordan Botelho and Maris Leofau, but that's why Xavier Watts was one of my guys that has to play well. Like, if Xavier can be an impact player on that third level, and then the other guys can just kind of do their job, I think this defense could make enough stops to allow Notre Dame to win this football game. I do. That's going to be very, very key. David Carpenter asks, who catches the first pass tomorrow and who catches the first touchdown? Man, I have no idea. Let's have some fun. So no one bet on this. No one take this to the grave. No one say that this is a stone cold lock prediction, but I'm going to go here. The guy that catches the first pass of the game tomorrow will be, I'm going to go Holden Stace. I'm going to go a tight end pass. That's where I'm going to go. Or a check down to the running back. One of those two. Let me think. Which one do I want to go with? I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to go, first guy to catch a pass is Holden Stace. I'm going to go with that. Who catches the first touchdown? My hope it's Chris Tyree. I mean, I don't care, but I'm going to say my hope is that it's, because touchdown's a touchdown. But here's why I hope that it's Chris Tyree or Tobias Merriweather. Because those guys aren't, Chris Tyree's probably not scoring on like a 2-yard catch, right? Maybe you can run like a motion slide and they'll sprint out and catch the ball and get the edge. Sure, that may happen. But if Tobias scores or Tyree scores, most likely it's a bigger play. It's a 25 to 30 plus yard play. And if Notre Dame's able to get a big score in the air on a big play, that really changes how Ohio State's going to defend them. Now, I'm not sold that Ohio State's going to come out and just play their "this is who we are" defense that they did really the first 3 games. We saw them do some of their linebacker pressures on third down and second and long when they really felt they were whooping Western Kentucky up front. They started bringing more pressures, some of those linebacker pressures. But this year, they've been very much we trust our guys. We're going to line up and play. We're going to fly to the football. You're not better than us, so we don't need to potentially blitz into problems, right? Which, kudos to Jim Knowles for doing that. I think that's smart against teams that you're significantly better than, and they have been significantly better than their opponents so far. I don't know that they're significantly better than Notre Dame. I don't think that's my opinion, but I don't think they think that they're significantly better than Notre Dame. I certainly think Ohio State thinks they're the better football team. I would be disappointed if they didn't think that they're the better football team, but it's one thing to think you're the better football team, and it's quite another thing to go into a game and say, hey, we don't respect this opponent, so we're just going to line up and do what we do. I think that's something that hurt Clemson last year. I think Clemson thought they were going to come into the game against Notre Dame last year, and they're playing this Notre Dame team that was not very far removed from losing to Stanford. This is a Notre Dame team that had lost to Clemson or Marshall, right? Clemson played them like 3 weeks after they lost to Navy or Stanford. Yeah, they beat Syracuse, but Syracuse lost their starting quarterback. Notre Dame had a convincing win over UNLV, but it was sloppy. The Notre Dame run game was good, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, it wasn't vintage 2017. Notre Dame hadn't rushed for over 5 yards a carry, really over 4.8 yards a carry since the BYU game. They'd only had two games that up to that point in time in the season where they were over 5 yards a carry, and that was against BYU and a bad North Carolina defense. I don't think that Clemson really had a lot of respect for Notre Dame. And when I say respect, I don't mean that they were disrespectful. They came in talking trash. That's not Clemson's thing. Coach Swinney has always been very respectful towards Notre Dame. What I mean respect is like, we don't fear you. We don't, and I mean like a healthy fear, like fear of the Lord kind of thing, where we're going to come out and we're going to really make sure that we're doing this and we're doing that. And we got to, man, boy, guys, we got to bring our A game. We got to make sure we're scheming because they can give us problems here. They looked at the matchup and said, we have one of the best D lines in college football. We have one of the best linebacking cores against college football, and they can't throw the football. So we're just going to line up, do we do, and kick their butt. Lo and behold, that lack of respect for who Notre Dame could be cost them because Notre Dame whooped them, right? Absolutely whooped them. And so that played a big role in it. I do not see Jim Knowles making that same mistake. I think Jim Knowles is going to say, hey, I trust my guys. We are going to line up and play our defense, but I'm going to have some stuff for Notre Dame. We're going to have to be on top of our game. We're going to have to, attack this part of their weakness. We're going to have to go after this. We're going to have to kind of create some mistakes on this defense because I don't think he's going to sit there and say, we're just going to line up and play our base defense for 60 minutes and Notre Dame can't do a darn thing about it. Jim Knowles is way too good of a football coach for that. So I do think we'll see more of the pressures coming up, and I think they're going to try to take away the quick game from Notre Dame with their corners. Either playing off, but then because there's two ways to do that. One is to play press, in which I think they'll do in the boundary, not as much of the field. The other way is when you are playing off to not bail at the snap. A lot of teams in Notre Dame have played this year bailed at the snap, which is partly why we haven't seen a lot of deep balls. Central Michigan was the first team that really did not bail at the snap. And you saw what Notre Dame did. They just threw it over their head early and often. I think Sam Hartman went like 4 or 5 for 230-some yards in that game, had a 76-yard touchdown pass, a 75-yard touchdown pass, a 42-yard pass on one of those plays, a 39-yard pass on a post route. So he hit 2 goals, a seam, and a post against Central Michigan because they didn't respect the deep ball. Ohio State will show more reverence for that, but they've got better corners than Central Michigan. So I think they can say, look, they're not going to do that to us. But the other thing is we're going to take away the quick game. We're going to make them throw the ball down the field because we don't think that they can protect the quarterback long enough with Mike Hall and Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. And I think we'll see some of Hero Canoe Ty Hamilton, Hero Canoe, all those type of guys. I don't know that we can necessarily just line up and handle that. But I think we can get these matchups where we can kind of, in certain passing downs or in rundowns, those guys can have some success winning individual battles. So if we take away the quick game and force them to go throw the ball downfield, they're not going to get enough of those off. And why would they think that? Partly because of last year and partly because I still don't think that there's there's still I'm going to make the receivers beat me mentality when you look at this Notre Dame football team and how teams are going to defend them. So short story long, David, to answer your question, if Tyree or Tobias gets that first touchdown and it's a big play, man, that puts Ohio State in a whole different situation where, okay, can we continue to do this and expose ourselves to some more big plays, or do we have to alter what we're doing in order to defend that? And then that opens up other things. And how does Notre Dame counter? That's one of the chess matches of football that I absolutely love. I loved it as a coach, and I love it now as an analyst, is seeing that kind of stuff. And so I'm very much curious to see how that's going to play out. And that's why I'm hoping when we get to tomorrow that Tobias or Chris Tyree or one of those two players catches the first touchdown of the game. Joe Allen asks, do you think that Notre Dame will get a bunch of commitment announcements soon after the game if they win? I hope not. And you're probably not going to like this answer, but I hope not. Because if a guy now, could they get some commitments this weekend? Yes, they definitely could. But if it is, it's going to be from guys that they've been in a great position with for a long time. I'm not going to say names, but just because I don't want people to think that, oh, well, that guy's on commit watch. I'm just saying, like, there's probably 3 or 4 kids that we kind of have our eye on, that if things go well based on the long-term relationship, this could be a weekend where the kid makes a decision. We can see that. But in a lot of other instances, if a kid makes a decision this weekend, you got to question, like, okay, is that a decision that's going to stick? Is that a thoughtful, thorough, okay, I've really thought about my future and this is where I want to go situation? Or is it a situation where the kid got caught in the moment, got caught in the excitement, got caught in the buzz, he commits, but then in a month from now, he's going to be like, man, I wasn't ready to commit yet. I still wanted to take this visit that I had planned to so and so. I still wanted to go visit here. And now all of a sudden the kid starts second guessing. So I don't usually like emotional big win commitments, because I've seen too many times in the past when they end up not sticking in the end, or the kid doesn't decommit, but he gets here and he's got doubts about whether or not this is the place, and then he doesn't stay as long. So in either case, I would rather there not be a rash of commitments from guys that we don't anticipate maybe being in commit mode already. If it's a kid you're like, man, like I don't that kid, that was a surprise. Wasn't expecting that one. Those ones would make me nervous, to be completely honest with you. I like kids to commit on a better time frame, meaning their terms, not getting caught up in the moment of a visit. Those can have a higher tendency not to work out. Question from Irish Blooded. I saw on ESPN, they ranked the Ohio State run game better than Notre Dame. How do you feel about the depth and run game of the two heads up? I mean, I did a whole breakdown on this on Wednesday, so I won't spend too much time on it right now, because I did break it down already. But I understand why ESPN has that grade the way that they do. The perception is they know highly ranked guys, right? That they perceive the guys to be ranked higher. And I've seen some people say, like, well, they have that because all the Ohio State guys are ranked higher than all the Notre Dame guys. I'm like, well, that's not really true. If you actually look at the running backs that are actually in the rotation for Ohio State, they're not guys that are necessarily big time recruits. Chip Trayanum was ranked as the number 285 player in the country on the on three consensus ranking, and only one outlet had him in the top 250, 300, and that was ESPN had him 285. Mayan Williams is a 3-star recruit. And when you look at Notre Dame and you look at Notre Dame's backup, their depth chart at running back, and you look at the guys that are playing, Jadarian Price is a guy that was a top 200 player. And I'm looking his ranking up right now. Jeremiah Love was a top 100 guy. Jadarian Price was ranked as the number 212 player in the country on the on-3 consensus ranking. He was ranked number 166 overall by 247 Sports. He was in the Rivals 250. He was in the ESPN 300. So he was ranked higher than anybody else that they had. And then you look at Jeremiah Love, he was a top 100 player on 3 and 247 Sports Composite. He was number 77 on 3. He was number 79 on 247. He was ranked as a top 100 recruit by on 3, 247, and ESPN. His lowest ranking was number 129. And then Audric Estime was a 4-star back as well. It really comes down to perception of the programs. Ohio State has produced how many NFL running backs in recent years? Good players and not very good players, but a lot of running backs, right? So whether it's Ezekiel Elliott, you've got who is it, Carlos Hyde. You've had even going back to the Jim Tressel era with I'm drawing a Beanie Wells. You look recently, and Trey Sermon is a guy that is in the NFL. J.K. Dobbins obviously is a guy that was a highly ranked player. Who's Notre Dame's top running back in the NFL right now? Kyron Williams, who's like a 5th-round pick. Tony Jones, who's an undrafted free agent. So it just comes down to perception. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, folks. It comes down to perception. What's silly about it is you just expect more, and I understand all of your frustration because you just expect more. You really do. I mean, last year, this year, Ohio State's averaging. Let's just look at the numbers, right? Ohio State's averaging 156.7 yards per game. 5.2 yards per play. Notre Dame's averaging 204.5 yards per game, 5.9 yards per carry. Last year, Ohio State averaged 192.4 rushing yards per game. Notre Dame averaged 189.1 yards per game. They were very similar. Ohio State had a higher yard per carry, 5.4 to 4.6. So there's this perception that Ohio State is just a significantly better running team because of history. When in reality, that's not what Ohio State's been the last couple of years. And then they act like Notre Dame hasn't had really good running teams in recent years. So there's a perception thing, but it all boils down to the things we've talked about in the past, which is Ryan's texting me saying, hey, Kyron's a starting running back now. I get all that, but he was a 5th-round draft pick, right? But the point is there's a perception problem for Notre Dame when it comes to things like this. And the sad thing is most of these talking heads at ESPN, not all, because I've seen some really good analysis from Greg McElroy, who will break down things you're like, there's no way he could be talking about that subject right there if he has not done his homework on these football teams, right? But you look at it and say, most of these guys don't. I mean, do you really think like Booger McFarland's like dove into the film of Notre Dame? Do you think some of these other talking heads, I'm like thinking who this other guy was I was listening to the other day, and somebody was telling me about it. It's like, do you really think this guy's at all like broken down the film and looked at what Notre Dame's doing, watching the blocking scheme, watching the diversity of the run game, doing all these type of things? No, they're not. They're looking at, they're just going with perception. Do you think half of these guys that say that said Ohio State has a better running game, do you think any of them, honestly, do you think any of them, if you were to ask them right there on the spot, and let's say the host did his job and said, well, hold on a second. Do you know what the rushing numbers are for these two teams? Do you know what they are doing yards per game? Do you know what they're doing yards per carry? They'd have no answer. No answer. If you responded with, do you realize that Ohio State's best game this year, like their best game against Western Kentucky, they had the same number of yards that Notre Dame is averaging on the season? Are you aware of that? Like, no, we weren't aware of that. They wouldn't know because they're not doing real analysis. And that's the saddest thing about ESPN, in my opinion. There's just been so many people that have gotten hired because they played, because their names, because whatever reason, and they don't give real analysis, but they're being kind of expected to give real analysis. And a lot of it's just lazy, to be honest with you. And it's disappointing because you expect better, and there's just really no competitor still with ESPN. As much as I hate it, there's no real competitor. How many of you guys have said a thing about what's been said about Notre Dame on CBS Sports or Fox this week? None of you have come to me with that. It's always ESPN, 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 because we still watch. Well, I don't, but people still watch. And so that's why they get away with it. But it's just lazy analysis. And I broke down the specifics of the matchup on Wednesday. Irish Blooded, I'd encourage you to go listen to that show. I did a whole breakdown, position by position breakdown. I broke down the Notre Dame run game against the Ohio State run defense, the Notre Dame run defense against Ohio State rush offense. So I broke all that stuff down on Wednesday. I would encourage you to check that one down. Somebody just brought up Paul Feinbaum as a joke. Like, do you think Paul Feinbaum breaks down Notre Dame film every week? He said it in jest, but that's exactly my point, right? He's going to get paid to give his opinion on this matchup, but he doesn't have a clue really about either one of these teams. He really doesn't, and that's kind of what it boils down to. So, when you look at it, to me, that's where it comes from. Right now, on paper, based on what we've seen on film, Notre Dame has a clearly better running game right now than Ohio State. They have a better running back at the top than Ohio State does right now. Maybe he's not the NFL draft player that TreVeyon Henderson is, but right now, TreVeyon Henderson has 191 yards in 3 games on 30 carries. He's averaging 6.4 yards per carry. Audric Estime's coming off of a game in which he averaged, now I know his total is listed at 176 for 20. I actually think that's incorrect. I have him down at 19 carries for 174 yards in one game. That's almost TreVeyon Henderson's entire season. He did that on 19 carries, right? So, Audric's averaging 8.3 yards per carry. Do you think anybody at ESPN really has a clue? Like those guys, I think if you were to ask Greg McElroy about Audric Estime, he'd be able to talk to you about, because he's seen him play. Also, Greg's called a couple games that Audric's went off in. But most of these guys don't have a clue who he is. And now your job as a football program, if you're Notre Dame, is to make them know who you are now, right? It's like, now you need to know who I am. Now you better respect me. Now you better give me real analysis. Now you better put some respect on our name next week when you talk about us. Do that, and then we'll start getting it right. Do that, and the perception will change. But if Notre Dame doesn't go out there and win, if Aldrich Estime doesn't go off, if the run game doesn't go off, if the line doesn't block well, if they're not able to have a good scheme and that scheme's not executed, guess what? Then it validates everything that they think about you as a program, everything that they think about you. And so if you don't like it, do something about it. It's the best part of sports. If you don't like what somebody has to say, shut them up. Or you shut up because you had your chance to shut them up and they beat you again. And that's the fun part of what is in front of Notre Dame this weekend against Ohio State. That's not there when they beat Clemson. Let's be honest. ESPN has never given Clemson the respect that they deserve as a program. Some do, but as a whole, they really don't. Ohio State gets a ton of respect. A lot of it they deserve. Some of it they don't. But you've got your chance to say, okay, now it's time for us to earn that. Why does Georgia get respect now? Because they beat Alabama. They beat Ohio State. They beat Michigan, right? They've done what they needed to do to be in this spotlight where they are the defending two-time champs. So you have to put respect on their name because they earned it. The respect that Clemson does get, and I don't think it's nearly as much as a team you'd think that should for winning 2 championships in the last 10 years. The only respect they do get is because they won those 2 titles, because they've beat Bama, they've beat Ohio State multiple times, they've beat Georgia multiple times. You have to respect them because they earn that respect. And that's what's so great about the opportunity for tomorrow, man. That's what's great about the opportunity. So we'll see how it goes. Next question from John A1. Howard Cross showed up by himself on the D-line last year. Who does Notre Dame need to join most for the D-line to have success? I mentioned this the other day too, John. I mentioned this in the midweek rundown. For me, it comes down to 2 guys, Riley Mills and Jordan Patelho. Those are your 2 most talented players. They're the 2 guys that when they flash, it's the most impressive, disruptive you have on their D-line. In games like this, we said it before, your stars got to be stars, right? Your guys with the most talent, with the most upside, with the most whatever, have to play to that level in games like this. They have to. Big reason why Ohio State beat Notre Dame last year. It's not the only reason why, but a big reason why. Their stud quarterback, who was not having the best game of his career because of things that Notre Dame was doing, and Jackson Smith and Jigba goes down. He was supposed to be their leading receiver. He was their slot guy. Whatever excuse you want to give, but here's what I know. Here's what was an excuse. Whenever Notre Dame made a mistake, he made them pay for it. When the game was on the line in the second half and they needed their star quarterback to put the team on his shoulders in the second half, he did. He made some throws the last game. You're like, defensive, you're like, dude, sorry, man. There's nothing you can do about that. That's just a top 5 NFL draft pick throw right there. Sorry, there's nothing you can do about it. Like that was needed. If he doesn't play like that, maybe Notre Dame is within a touchdown late in the game and they can do something, right? But he said, no, not today. I got this. And that's what the best players do. And Notre Dame needs their best players to do that on this type of stage. We know they can do it against Central Michigan and Navy and NC State and even Clemson to a degree last year, and Navy and Boston College and Syracuse and UNLV and North Carolina and BYU. Can they do it on this stage? That's the question. And they're going to. The optimism I have is that the Clemson game was considered a very big game as well. I don't think it was considered as big of a game as this because of the perception, even though Clemson was ranked higher than Ohio State is right now. I still don't think they're viewed as the same kind of program that Ohio State is viewed as. I don't think that's accurate. They've won 2 championships since Ohio State won their last one. They're 2-1 against Ohio State in matchups in the postseason, right? Ohio State won the most recently, but Clemson won. Matter of fact, Clemson's 3-1 in the last 11, 12 years against Ohio State in the postseason. They beat them in the Orange Bowl after 2013. They beat them in the college football playoff in 2016, 31-0. They beat them by a field goal, 2 or 3 points. I forget what the final score was, but in 2019, a great game, by the way. Ohio State jumped on them early. Clemson came back. Phenomenal game. One of the best playoff games we've ever had because it's one of the few competitive playoff games we've ever had. But in that game, what happened though, right? Is Trevor Lawrence said, "No, we're not losing today. I got this. No, I know Ohio State has officiating, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, Trevor Lawrence said, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't do what he did, you're in a situation where it doesn't matter how bad the officiating was. Doesn't matter. It's like Miami fans complaining about the pass interference in 2002 against Ohio State. Well, here's the deal: if you guys would have handled your business in the first 58 minutes of the game, that pass interference doesn't matter. And so it was a similar situation where Trevor just said, "I got this." You need your stars to be stars if you're going to win games like this. There's no doubt about it. For those asking, it's not me in the chat; it's Ryan. I said Ryan's in the background producing today, so Ryan's the one with engaging with you guys in the chat right now. David Carpenter says, predict the first Ric Flair woo moment of the game for Notre Dame. Well, David, I'm going to go back to my previous comment, and I'm hoping that it's like one of those big plays from the aforementioned wide receivers. Maybe it's Audric Estime running somebody over. It'd be nice. Maybe it's a big play on defense. Somebody, 3rd and 2, they're running stretch, and you just, linebacker shoots through, blows them up, something like that. You hope it's one of those moments. That's really what you kind of hope for. Irish Blood says, more passing touchdowns or more rushing touchdowns for Notre Dame tomorrow? Well, based on how they've gone this season, you're going to see more passing touchdowns. On the season, Notre Dame has 9 rushing touchdowns so far and 15 passing touchdowns. So I would imagine that, we'll see something similar. I don't know that Ohio State's been put in a ton of goal to go situations, but I think this unit is built to be pretty good at that. They're very physical on the end. They got 265 to 270 pound kids on the edge, so they can really be stout on edge setters, on kind of off tackle runs inside the 5. They're not real big up the middle, but they can get bigger. Tyreek Williams is not listed at a very big weight, but he's kind of a stout kid. Michael Hall's short, low to the ground. He's only 280, but man, that guy can root hog up in there and get underneath you and just stop the line of scrimmage right there, because he can just basically take out the legs of the guys across. You can put Hero Canoe in. Their linebackers are pretty aggressive. So, that's going to be a tough team to really just pound it in on unless you've got 3 or 4 cracks at it. So, there's going to be times where if you get in those situations, you may need to throw a fade or do some kind of play action or get the ball in that way. But Notre Dame's also been a team that hasn't really needed a lot of goal to go situations in recent years in recent games because they haven't been a big play group. But I would imagine that we'll see more passing touchdowns than rushing touchdowns if Notre Dame scores enough to win. It could be a thing where, last year they had more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns because they had 1, right? And you hope that that's not the case again. Did have a few super chats. We got one from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. I can't wait for Saturday night. I believe that Notre Dame will get it done. Hope so, man. This feels Notre Dame's going to go broke. This feels Notre Dame going to break out of big game letdowns and win big. Notre Dame 45, Ohio State 27. I'll take it. I mean, you won't have any complaints from me, man. I think it's interesting that you pick the same score that pretty much the same score that Michigan had when they broke out of their against Ohio State. I mean, what was it? Michigan had lost, I believe it was like 14 out of 15. I'm going to look this up. And the only loss that Ohio State had, I believe, was 2011, when it was that year between when Tressel got fired and Urban Meyer got hired. So, yes, I'm looking at it now. 2011, Michigan won. Prior to the 2021 win, the last time Michigan had beaten Ohio State, other than that one sort of anomaly year, was back in 2003. And, some of those games were competitive, but a lot weren't. 37-21, 25-21 was close. 42-39 was close. 14-3, 42-7, 21-10, 37-7, 26-21, 42-41 were close, but then 42-28. 42-13. The overtime game in 16, 30-27 was one of the best Ohio State-Michigan games that I've ever seen, and I've watched a lot of them growing up in Ohio. 31-20, 62-39, and then 56-27. And then, of course, in 2020, if they'd have played, Ohio State would have destroyed Michigan in 2020 if they would have played. If Michigan didn't kind of have their issues and cancel their season, basically. But they came out in that first game, and when they broke down the door, man, to your point, they kicked it down with aggressiveness. and beat Ohio State 42-27. And then, of course, they did what they did to them last year. So you're kind of combining the two scores. You got Michigan's output last year, and then Ohio State's output 2 years ago in the Michigan game. But it's very close to that Michigan score. If that's the final score of the game, I'd be thrilled. That'd be thrilled. I wouldn't be surprised if it's that kind of final score either way. Just these games, sometimes they're exactly what we hope they are, and it's just two great teams and a great game. But it's not always like that. Not everybody brings their same effort or same execution to every big game. Sometimes one team just has a bad night, and like when Clemson beat Ohio State 31-0 in 2016. That wasn't a great Ohio State team by any stretch, but were they really 31 points worse than Clemson? Or was that just Clemson's night? It was just Clemson's night, right? Stuff happens sometimes. When Ohio State beat Clemson in 2020, 49-28, were they really 21 points better than Ohio State that day? I mean, like as a team, I don't think so. You could argue they were better, but were they that much better? I don't think so. That was just Ohio State's night. It was, just kind of how it is. It was a 14-14 game after the first quarter, and then, just that second quarter. I mean, literally every 3 of the 4 quarters, the two teams scored the exact same points, except for one. It was a 21-0 second quarter that really broke that thing open for Ohio State and allowed them to win the game. And it was a dominant. It wasn't like fluke plays. It was a dominant second quarter. It was just their night. Sometimes that happens, and you just hope that doesn't happen to Notre Dame. But if it happens, you mean against Notre Dame. But if it happens for Notre Dame, that's the kind of statement. When, like, really, honestly, guys, like, why do you think Michigan gets all the hype right now from the media? Why do you think that is? It's not anything they've done in the postseason. They got blown out by Georgia 2 years ago and lost to TCU last year. It's because they not only beat Ohio State, they smacked Ohio State both times, and so they earned their respect. And that's what Notre Dame's got to do tomorrow. We have a comment from Cam Ald. Why do I feel versus last year we are better and OSU is worse, but my confidence level is about the same? Well, I can answer the second one for sure. It's not even BK PTSD. It's ND PTSD, man. I mean, this is just not a game Notre Dame has won in a long time. It's just not. I mean, they've had the occasional upset win over Michigan going back to, was it 1998, the year after they won a title. Notre Dame beats them, was like 35-20. You had some good wins over highly ranked Michigan teams. You had a highly ranked win over a Michigan team in 2005. Notre Dame goes to Michigan with that Brady Quinn team, and we're all kind of wondering, how good is this team going to be? You had a really nice win over Pitt in the opener that you go play number 3 Michigan. You beat them 17-10. Well, lo and behold, Michigan wasn't very good that year. It was 7, went 7-5. So it's just not a game that they've won a lot, to be honest with you. So I can understand why there's some angst with a lot of you. I truly get it in regard to, man, I feel good about this team. I really do. But guys, I've done that with myself this week. Man, I study the film. I study the numbers. I look at the matchups. I do all the stuff I normally do when I break these games down. And I feel good about Notre Dame's chances, but it's just like, okay, but I'm 45 and I just haven't seen Notre Dame play really well in this type of game since I was in high school and young high school, not even like senior year high school, like freshman year of high school. So I get it. I really do get it. And it's understandable. And until they start winning games like this, it's going to be a natural reaction to when these moments come. And if they don't win this game, you're going to feel the exact same way against USC, and you're going to feel the exact same way against Clemson. It's just the reality of it. But this is the kind of game that can start giving you that confidence that they can win these games. Zibby94 with a super chat. Thank you, Zibby. Brian, how do Central Michigan's tackles compare to the new Ohio State tackles? Did not seem like our edges were able to generate pressure versus CMU. Well, Notre Dame actually got a decent amount of pressure against Central Michigan at times when they let their D-line loose. The problem is they didn't let their D-line loose. They were using their defensive line way too often to really just kind of occupy blocks and let the linebackers come free. And the blitzes just did not work in that game. So I do not believe that the lack of production was anything really about a lack of allowing your guys to rush the quarterback. I really don't think it was that. You look at the numbers, you break it down, and I mean, that's just Jordan Patel had 15 pass rushes in the game. That's it. Not Riley had 16. Howard Cross had 17. Javante had 17. Javante Jean Baptiste, according to Pro Football Focus, had 55 pressures on 17 pass rushes. It's pretty good. So it really came down to that, in my opinion. They weren't really turned loose. Western Michigan did some stuff, quick game, moving the pocket, things like that. I didn't like the game plan. I really didn't. I felt like when you look at what they've done in past games, when they really turn the defensive line loose, they're able to be more impactful. They just haven't really turned them loose. And when they have turned them loose, they need Jordan Patelho to be more impactful. They do. He needs to be better. I mean, right now, I'm pretty sure that I'm accurate on this. I believe Josh Burnham has more pressures this season than Jordan Patelho. Let me see here. Only one fewer. So Patelho on see here on Jordan Patelho on 72 or 65 pass rushes has 5 pressures. Josh Burnham on 23 pass rushes has 4 pressures so far this season. So they're going to need Jordan Patelho to really step up in this game. He's a big one. Big one. so so Ryan just texted me. He's listening to what I'm saying. He just texted me and he said, "This is so messed up. I don't even want to read it, but it's funny." He said Javante Jean Baptiste pass rush win rate was the same as Tyler Buckner's completion rate last week. Oh, that's really mean, Ryan. That's really mean. I can't believe you said that. That's so mean. We have some more super chats here. Thanks, Zibby, for that super chat, by the way. Got another one from him. From what you've seen in camp, how is Tobias Merriweather's jump ball skills? That's an area he's got to get better at. He's got good timing. He's got great length. He's just got to get stronger. And that's what we've seen him. I've seen Tobias snatch the ball out of the air impressively in these type of situations, and then it just gets knocked out, right? Like that's the key is learning some of the craft stuff you can do as a receiver. So like if you high point a ball and you're in the end zone and your back's to the back line and you're coming down and you've got a guy in front of you, when you catch it, you bring it behind, don't bring it down, because the DB is going to be taught to punch up. So you'll see guys catch it and then stay up or bring it back. There's other things you can do where you've got to catch and you've got to learn to turn your shoulders. I mean, there's like things like that as you get some more experience, he'll learn those things. That's part of the craft of wide receiver play. But the biggest thing for Tobias is he's just going to have to continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger to where you can't muscle it away from him like that. And that's going to be a key for him. But as far as like the length, the timing, he can leap, he can get up really high. My wife has a picture that she took from the game on Saturday. For those of you who don't know, my wife does photography for Notre Dame games. But like where he scores the touchdown against Central Michigan and he's jumping up in the air, and she got kind of a photo like right when he's at the top of his jump. And I'm like, good Lord, that kid can get up. Like that kid can really get off the ground. And he can do all that. He's a springy kid. It's just strength. That's really the thing is getting knocked. And strength is not just about holding on to the ball when you come down. Strength is also about, can you stay on your track? A strong receiver can stay on his track when he's running vertically. A guy that's not as strong is going to a little bit more easily get knocked off of his track. And that's a big part of being an effective pass catcher as well is, can you stay on your track? Or are you going to get knocked off your track? That's a big part of being an effective contested ball type of guy is that kind of stuff right there. And those are areas where Tobias is going to have to get better. He's got the potential, and you'd like to see him get it done, but that's a big key for me. I believe we had a couple more super chats down here. One from Shelton Haggard. Thank you, Shelton. I'm so freaking ready for tomorrow night. I was born in 1991, but if I was around in 1988, I'd have to think it felt something like that year. Go Irish, beat OSU. I wasn't around then. I wasn't around. And I would think it had to feel closer to Miami in 88 than Florida State in 93. I need to ask some of my older friends about this because I'd be very curious about this answer too, Sheldon. And the reason I say I would think it was more like Miami than Ohio State than Florida State is because Miami was a power program at the time. Like they were a big dog. They were the defending champs. Like I said, they were the number one team. They had won 30 some straight games in a row. Like they were that team. I remember it was 30, it was 30 something regular season games in a row. It was actually what their winning streak was because they had lost to Penn State in the I think it was the Orange Bowl in 1985. So they had won a bunch of games in a row. No, it was actually Tennessee. Was Penn State was that 86? 86 is when they lost to Penn State. But if you go back, they had the last time they had lost a regular season game was Florida to open up the 85 season. So they won 10 straight in 1985. They won 11 straight in 1986. They won 11 straight regular season in 1987. And then they come out in 1988. They had already beaten number one Florida State 31-0. They went on the road, beat number 15 Michigan. They beat Wisconsin 23-3. They beat Missouri 55-0. So they had won 30 some regular season games in a row and were just a really, really hot team. And that, like, Florida State was also really good back then. I mean, Florida State was a great team, but Florida State was more of an up and coming program. They were more like what Notre Dame is now. If anything, Florida State, and some of you might, I'd be curious what some of you think about this. Like Florida State in 93 was more of Notre Dame now, and Notre Dame was more of in the shoes that Ohio State is, where like it was a little longer since Ohio State's won their title. It's like 9 years now, where Notre Dame was like 5 years removed from their last title. But Notre Dame was the established big boy. Florida State had been ranked high, but they hadn't really earned that type of standing. The year they'd lost to Miami every year, lost to Miami in 1992, lost to Miami and Florida in 1991, lost to Miami and Auburn in 1990, the two best teams that you played. 1989, they lost to Southern Miss and Clemson. 1988, that was, I think, Deion's last year. They lost to Miami again, 31-0. So, like, they were kind of, like what Notre Dame is now, kind of like what Clemson was, where, yeah, you guys are talented, you guys are good, but you guys don't win the big games. Notre Dame was the established team, and then they weren't able to beat Notre Dame that day. Where in 88, Notre Dame was where they are now, where they were the team that, hadn't won in over a decade at the time. I mean, their last title was in 77 at the time. Miami was the defending champ. They were that team. They were the Georgia, the Alabama of that era, and Notre Dame beat them. So I would imagine this game is much, much closer to that than the 93 game. And so to your point about that 88 game, I would think it was similar to what it is now. And there's some other differences, two polar opposite programs in so many different ways, geographically, all that. At least Ohio State and Notre Dame share geography. It's like, 4.5 hours from Columbus to South Bend. So but they're also still very different programs in a lot of different ways, very different fan bases. There is no doubt about that. So good question, Shelton. Tristan Paul with a super chat. Thank you, Tristan. If Ohio State loses to us, then Michigan this year, would you consider their program on the temporary decline? Well, it depends on how you define that, Tristan. I think a case could be made that it would show that they're on a temporary decline if you counted temporary decline as just how did this season go relative to past seasons. Then sure, yeah, that would be, because the last time Ohio State lost 2 games in a year, I believe, was 2017 was the last time Ohio State lost 2 regular season games in the same season. So I'll actually just make sure of that. I know they lost 2 in 2017. They lost to Oklahoma and lost to Iowa. 18, the only loss was to Purdue. 19, they didn't lose until the postseason. 20, they didn't lose until the postseason. 21, they only had 1 loss. 22 or 2021, they did lose 2 games. I forgot about the Oregon game in 2021. So, in that regard, sure, you can call it a temporary decline. I don't. Here's the thing. Boy, that's a good man. That's a good question, because as I'm talking through it, Tristan, like, I forgot that they lost 2 games in 2021. You could really say that if Ohio State loses 2 games this year, in the regular season to Michigan and Notre Dame that you could just say they're on the decline, period, not even just temporary, to where they have to then go out in the postseason and into next season and show that they're not Clemson. Because here's my point. If Ohio State loses these two games, because this is what's at stake for Ohio State this year. If Ohio State loses this game to Notre Dame, and let's just say they lose a third straight to Michigan, which I don't think is going to happen, but let's say they do. What makes them different from Clemson? What? The last 3 years they haven't won a playoff game, right? In the last 3 years, they only made it once and they got beat. It was a close game, but they got beat. They will have lost 2 games in the regular season in 2 of the last 3 seasons. What makes them different from Clemson at that point in time? They're now still living off their reputation. You'll have had, so let's see, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, almost a decade since their last title. The only time they made it to the championship game in that stretch, they got blown out. So, like, what would make them different from Ohio State or from Clemson? You know, that's a decline from where they were from 2014 to 2000 and really 19, right? Where they were a one-loss team. The 17 year was the anomaly. You know, one of your losses was to I mean, I still feel like Oklahoma was the best team in college football that year. That Oklahoma team was tremendous. They just ran into a bad matchup against Georgia. I've said this. It's one of the things, you know, you just believe in. No one can prove you differently. And you can't prove anybody that you're right. It's just a feeling. But I've said this: if Oklahoma would have been able to make a stop against Georgia in the fourth quarter or in overtime and beat Georgia, they'd have won a championship. They'd have beat Alabama that year. I wholeheartedly believe that. They matched up very well against Bama that year. So, but they didn't. But that team beat Ohio State at Ohio State. It was a really good football team with Baker Mayfield. And then they just had a fluky game against Iowa. Just, you know, had an early pick six, just some stuff really. It was just one of those days, like I mentioned earlier, just one of those days where just not your day. And that day they lost in Iowa, at Iowa, man, like it was like 54 to 56 to 24. I mean, Iowa's not a 30-plus point better team than Ohio State. They're not even a better team than Ohio State. Just on that day, though, they were. And, you know, if they'd have played again the next week, the score might have been the same, but reversed. You know, it just was one of those days. But that was an anomaly for Ohio State. I mean, 2015, they lost one game, and they had the best roster in college football. 2014, they won a national championship. You know, 2016, they were a playoff team. 2017, you know, he had that fluky year we were just talking about. 2018, they were 13-1, won the Rose Bowl. You only had one loss, beat Michigan. You know, 2019, they took Clemson down to the wire. I mean, that was the defending national champs. They had a shot to win it at the end through a pick. You know, 2020, they played for the national championship in 2020. Like, they were that team. They were on the level with Georgia and Alabama and Clemson. In 2021, they get beat at home by Oregon, then get smacked by Michigan. 2022, beat Notre Dame, beat Penn State. Two team, you know, Notre Dame wasn't that good early. Penn State, I felt last year was overrated. You get smacked by Michigan, and yeah, you know, you're now getting into Notre Dame territory where you're bragging about a moral victory, which was actually a defeat against Georgia. But if we would have beat Georgia, we'd have won a championship. Maybe, probably, but you didn't. You didn't beat Georgia. That's like Notre Dame saying, well, if we would have beat Georgia in 2017, you know, we might have been a different team against Miami. Maybe, probably, but you weren't because you didn't. And that's kind of basic. That's, I mean, 2019, if Notre Dame beats Georgia, if Notre Dame gets the ball in Georgia territory less than 2 minutes ago, you've got the ball in their territory, you're down 6 points, a touchdown beats Georgia. That Notre Dame team at the end of the year, 11-1, would win at Georgia's probably in the college football playoff. But they didn't. So they weren't. So you look at Ohio State, had the loss last year, and then they come out and lose 2 more regular season games this year. They're Clemson. That's who they are. They're the current version of Clemson. That, yeah, you're pretty good. You're a top 10 team, but you're not that. On the flip side, if they beat Notre Dame, then that's them saying, you know, you had your shots to get us. You didn't. You know, you had your shot, Notre Dame. We have a new starting quarterback. You know, this team is this team is that. We got some really good young recruiting classes that you don't want to play against in 2 years when they're juniors, right? And sophomores and juniors and seniors and things like that. Okay, that's fine. You had your chance and you couldn't beat us, so you're just not on our level. That's what's at stake for them in this game. And then I still think they're going to get back at Michigan this year. I do. I could be completely dead wrong about this, but I do think that this Ohio State team by November is going to be really good. Really good. They may be good now. We'll find out on Saturday night, but I think they're going to be really good in November. And I think they get back at at Michigan. And if I'm wrong, then then there's problems in Columbus for what their expectations are. I'm curious to hear from some of the Ohio State fans in the chat, some of the reasonable Ohio State fans. What would you view? How would you view your team if they lose to Ohio State or if they lose to Notre Dame and Michigan this year? I'm very curious about that. I'm very curious about that. Again, not a homer take. I want an honest assessment. What would you say about your team if they lose to Notre Dame and Michigan again this year? Very curious about that. I'm going to bring this one up now. What are your thoughts on Tim May? I am not going to comment on that. I'm just going to let you all. I gave some comments on his interview on CFB Nation, which is the other channel that I own. Put those on the message board, and that's where they're going to stay for now. So, but it was interesting. It was an interesting comment. But other than that, I have no comment. No comment about that. Pete Weber with a super chat. Thank you, Pete. Sorry I'll miss the tailgate, but dropping you guys a super chat to buy a few extra brats for tomorrow with my score prediction, 31-21. I appreciate that, Pete. And his super chat was 31-21. I did it. Who do you think you are? I am Big Dogs for life. Is that I am thing? Is that like Pete Weber's? Like, is that what he does? Isn't that what he does or something like that? Like the real Pete Weber. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you, Tyler. And thank you, Pete, very, very much for that, man. I'm sorry that you're not going to be at the tailgate tomorrow. Tyler Evans with a super chat. Thank you. If you had to pick one of these two schools, Clemson or Alabama, who gets their second loss this week? Personally, I think Clemson has a better chance to lose this week in Alabama. I do not. I'll be shocked if Alabama loses to Ole Miss. Shocked. I was very shocked when I saw that my entire staff picked Ole Miss to beat Bama. So I'm either going to look really smart or really stupid for making that pick. We all picked, all but one person picked Clemson to beat Florida State, which also surprised me. I thought I was going to be the only person that picked Clemson, or maybe only one of two. But a lot of my staff picked Clemson to win that game. I think of the two games, my personal opinion, I think some of my staff would disagree with you on this. They would say that Clemson has, that Alabama has the better chance to lose because in their predictions they picked Alabama to lose and Clemson to win. I think this is a good matchup for Alabama. I think they're going to run the football on Saturday. I think getting Jalen Milroe back for at least a week is going to spark them. I'm not a big Jalen Milroe fan. You guys know that, but he seems to be well liked by his team. He seems to have like a little bit of a, Malik Zaire to him as far as how the team rallies around him uniquely. And if you remember, that's how the team was with Malik. That for whatever reason, like Malik, that team believed in Malik. And when Malik was on the field in 2015, like they thought they could beat anybody. And then when Malik went down, that team still had a lot of confidence from the leadership that he had showed during the season. But, it couldn't be carried into the next year because Malik was no longer the leader of the team because of Brian Kelly's, decision to have a quarterback battle. But Jalen just seems to kind of spark the team that way. And we'll see if that carries into the Ole Miss game. I don't love this Ole Miss team. I think their offensive line has had some problems. I think that Alabama should have some success against them. I just don't think Nick Saban wants any part of losing to Nick Saban or to Lane Kiffin. And so, he's going to pull out all the stops. That's basically what he's going to do. He's going to pull out all the stops. I just think Alabama wins this game. So of those two, I would predict there's a greater chance that Ohio State or that Clemson loses, excuse me. Just your ordinary Joe. Forgive the boomer question. All good, buddy. I have to watch alone Saturday night. What can I do to somehow watch with the IB community or Indy family at large? Any live interactive things I've been missing? So, Joe, we don't do like a live show during the game. We have a live chat on the message board, and I do believe that you're a member of our board. Actually, you are a member of our board. So we have like a live chat where people, just post and respond to kind of what they're seeing. That's really all that we have is that. But you're with IB community, you're all watching it together. You're engaging with each other. That's really the biggest thing is to do that. And eventually we'll probably get to the point maybe someday where we do like live streams, but it's just hard to do those because we can't actually show the game. So that makes it a little bit tough. We have a super chat from, and but thank Joe, thank you for your super chat, by the way. Thank you for your super chat. Raheem Pelham asks, thank you for super chat, Raheem. Is this the game we finally see a jet sweep from Love? Seems like he can be really dangerous on that play. Possible, possible. I mean, look, you've seen his usage jump up the last couple weeks, Raheem, where not just where he's getting carries, but they're putting him in like two back sets. They're putting him on wheel routes. They're doing things, different things with him to give him the football. And some of that stuff has resulted in other guys coming open. Teams are very aware of him. Will Ohio State be aware of him? I would imagine so. So either you got to find different ways to try to get him the football in those situations, or you use him as a decoy. And I could see Notre Dame doing both in this situation. But I'm, it's funny. I had the same thought, Raheem, about that particular play or about a reverse, but I actually kind of thought about it from more of a Chris Tyree point of view. I'll just leave it at this. Like, a play I'll just leave it at this. And for you that watch the games and you that are on the message boards, you'll know what I'm talking about. There was a play that Notre Dame ran past week against Central Michigan, that would set up an opportunity to run something tricky off of it that we've actually seen in the past. Go for a big touchdown in a big game. And you guys that are really keyed in and are on the message board will know what I'm talking about. There's no doubt. Let's jump up to the top. I almost grabbed this tea here and forgot that I hadn't closed the lid. So give me 1 second, please. That would have been very bad if I would have tried to drink that with not realizing like the lid wasn't on. That'd have been memed. There's no doubt about that. Indy Estimate Trucking with the question, is the Indy secondary good enough to hold Harrison and Igbuka under 50 yards receiving, forcing Ohio State to find another way to win? No, I don't think there's any secondary good enough to hold them both under that kind of production. I don't. If you hold them under that kind of production, one of two things happened. Number one, you just destroyed their offensive line and your quarterback just could not get the ball out. Just could not get the ball out. Or number two, you got ripped up by somebody else. I mean, and that's what happened against Indiana. I don't believe Harrison and Igbuka came in and were close to 50 yards against Indiana, but they got ripped up by Cade Stover. And Julian Fleming had some money plays in that game, but that's what happened that game. But look, here's the deal. It wasn't the secondary that did that, in my opinion. It was the scheme did that, but exposed them to other things. And the fact that you had a first time starting quarterback. Like I view his start 2 years ago against Akron like I viewed Ian Book's start in 2017 against North Carolina. It's one thing to come off the bench and be the starter when there's no pressure. As soon as the starter's back, you're back to the bench. It's another thing when you're the guy and it's your team and the expectations are on you. And he didn't play well, but it was more about getting after the quarterback and getting the quarterback uncomfortable than it was shutting down those two receivers. That makes sense. So, like, could you hold them under 50? Yeah, but it's more scheme related, front related than it is your corners just locked them both down. I don't think that's what you could do. If it is, that'd be phenomenal. But they're gonna get their plays. That's gonna happen. There's no doubt in my mind. John A1 with a super chat or with a question. John says, so far this season, from a talent standpoint, who is a more talented player than you thought they'd be? For me, it's Audric Estime. That's not my pick. I think we saw Audric average 6.6 yards per carry in the last 10 games of last season. Like all these people that think Audric is this big thumper and, just this like Christian Okoye type of back. Like that's not what we saw last year. This is a dude that averaged 6.6 yards per carry in the last 10 games last year. That's a really impressive statistic. So I get where you're coming from, John. It's not saying that, you should, because there's other guys that you're going to be right on, but like 6.6 yards per carry, just for context, would have been a top 25 ranking last year if he'd have done that throughout the entire season. And it would have been top, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It would have been 12th among backs that had at least 100 carries. a lot of the guys that were higher than that didn't have a ton of carries. Like the leading rusher last year in the country for yards per attempt was John Lee Eldridge from Air Force, who I believe is a one of their slot backs. Let me just go check. Yeah, I believe he's one of their slot backs. He had 7.7 per carry, but he only had 99 carries. So he's getting a lot of those type of plays. So I don't really count that the same as like a main back. And a couple of those guys were quarterbacks. So, I mean, he was a top 10 running back last year as far as guys that had over 100 carries last season. So I'm not overly surprised by that. Uh, Pat Coogan in the last game, a couple times this year, has been a little better than I thought he could be. He's been better. DJ Brown against NC State looked like, wow, like DJ's moving a little quicker than I'd seen in the past and making plays that we hadn't seen him make in the opener, much less in the past. So he'd be one. There's really nobody else that I've seen that I'm surprised in a good way that they're more talented than I thought. Because my whole argument that I've been making the last year, especially, and then heading into this season, is this is a really talented Notre Dame team. They just need to be, guys got to step up. They've got to be put in position to maximize their skills, and they need a quarterback. So that would be it for me. Is I don't think the talent has surprised me. It's just getting it all together, and we're gonna find out if they can do that tomorrow night. Le Imrock asks, if any, what excuses can we expect if Ohio State loses in this game? Good question, because if Notre Dame does win, they'll be there. Okay, so if the game plays out to where Kyle McCord doesn't play well, it'll be, well, we've got a young quarterback, first-year starter quarterback. You guys needed a 30-year-old quarterback to come in and win. You've already seen some of that being set up already in social media standpoint. It'll be, you got them early. Ohio State's going to be way better late. Their offensive line is still gelling together. You'll see things like that. If it's a bad call, well, we got screwed by the officials. So a lot of it's just going to depend on how the game plays out and what is considered the primary reason for Notre Dame losing or Notre Dame winning and Ohio State losing. It'll come down to that, but it'll be something along the lines of like the quarterback and or they'll just flat out say this guy stinks as a coach, whatever position coach team unit struggles and he should be fired. That's kind of the go-to for some Ohio State fans that make such irrational, emotional decisions, which is similar to what Notre Dame fans do, if we're being honest. Every time Notre Dame has a bad game on offense or defense, it's fire the coach. I mean, it's just fans who make excuses tend to not be the most rational, and they tend to be the most emotional, and so they tend to have the most extreme reactions to those type of things. Rob Osgood with a question. What was your favorite pregame meal as a player? whatever our coaches were serving. No, honestly, I was a big chicken and pasta guy for if I could. So like not together. I'd like, spaghetti and then just a cooked chicken breast, like a really well-cooked chicken breast and pasta. That was kind of mine. In college, it was different because almost all of our games in college were like noon or 1:00 kickoffs. So in college, it was more of a breakfast. So I'd have scrambled eggs, I'd have bacon, I'd have potatoes, and I'd have either some toast or a bagel or a muffin, something like that. That was usually my go-to for breakfast. It got a little tricky on the road because the type of scrambled eggs we'd get on the road were usually like not very good. And you're like, man, I'm worried I'm gonna get sick if I eat these things. But yeah, potatoes, scrambled eggs, bacon, and some kind of bread, depending on what they had. That was my go-to for pregame meals in college because we always played afternoon games. Actually, I don't know. I don't know that I ever play. I've coached in some night games in college, but I don't think I've ever played in a night game in college. Yeah, I think I don't, no, the year I redshirted in '99, we played a night game against William Patterson, but that's it. But I didn't play in that game. Every other game that I can remember was a day game. So it's a little bit different. So it was always breakfast, not dinners. But in high school, spaghetti and chicken was my favorite if I could have it. John Klimek, once Notre Dame balls out this season, hypothetically, what coach do you think will get the most calls about leaving? Well, if Notre Dame balls out this year, and that's going to mean two things happen. One is the running backs keep balling out. And two is the defense is lights out, right? Defense is going to have to be lights out tomorrow night for Notre Dame to win. They're going to have to be lights out against USC for Notre Dame to win. If Notre Dame beats Ohio State and USC and the defense plays well, Al Golden becomes a really hot commodity. Because who was considered the two best offensive minds in college football? Think about this. It's Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day. And by most circles, that's who it is. If Al Golden's defense keeps both of those teams in check, and what I mean in check, I don't mean like you win 44-10. I just mean like they don't go off. They don't dominate you. You hold your own. Your guys make plays and you win the game. Al Golden becomes a hot commodity for two reasons. That one is right there. Well, three reasons. Two, he's got NFL experience. And then number three, he's got head coaching experience. He was at Miami. He had a lot of success at Temple. Didn't have a ton of success at Miami, but he wasn't, it was a terrible fit, in my opinion, just a really terrible fit. Like if, let's just say James Franklin left, let's just say Notre Dame's like just dominant the rest of the year. And Al Golden's defense plays great and James Franklin leaves. I mean, I think Al Golden gets an interview at his alma mater. I would think so. And you're going to have a lot of NFL teams calling him. The other guy to me would be Dylan McCullough. Would be the guy that I would think, because we know Coach McCullough wants to be head coach. He said so publicly. Coach Freeman has said so publicly. He's got the mentality, the way in which he develops his young people is very much, in my opinion, in a head coach type of way. So I would expect Dylan McCullough to be one of those guys that gets a lot of head coaches opportunities. If Notre Dame's a playoff team and they're really good this year, and Indiana's what we think Indiana's going to be the rest of the year, I mean, why would you not call Dylan McCullough if you're Indiana? I mean, he sent his sons there. He coached there. He's at Notre Dame. That's going to carry a lot of Midwestern kind of swagger for a guy on the recruiting trail. I'd be thinking it'd be foolish if you're Indiana not to get Dylan McCullough a call. If Notre Dame's what we hope Notre Dame's going to be and you're looking for head coach. Those would be the two off the top of my head. I mean, other guys will get calls. Chancey Stuckey will get a lot of NFL receiver coach calls. All their coaches are going to get called. To me, those two would be the most prominent. Now, I think the third might be Jared Parker if the offense keeps doing what they're doing, but I would hope that he would stay for at least another couple of years and really build up his reputation and build up his, kind of what he's going on. D-Rock Irish, I'm here in Ohio State, will go up tempo tomorrow. It wouldn't surprise me. We saw them do this against Western Kentucky a little bit. I think that it also would make a lot of sense based on who Notre Dame is, because Al Golden is a guy that likes to get a lot of calls in and a lot of communication. If I'm Ohio State and we can kind of go up tempo when they're not expecting it, it may take Notre Dame a couple plays to kind of realize what's going on. They're looking to the sideline. You're snapping the ball. All of a sudden, boom, 40-yard gain. You've been able to steal some yards. So it would not shock me at all. It would not shock me at all. Force Notre Dame to be in their basic defense. Don't let them get a lot of their exotic calls in, things like that. It would not shock me at all if Ohio State did that tomorrow. Whether they'll do the whole game, I don't know if that's what they want to do. But if they, as a mix-up, coming out early and doing it, yeah, I could absolutely see that. John Klimek, do you think Colorado's transfer portal roster is sustainable? Well, no, I don't think it's sustainable, but I don't think Colorado's trying to do that. I don't think they're trying to revamp the roster and get 50 guys every year. I don't think that's Coach Sanders' desire. I really don't. I mean, he's got 9 kids committed in the 2024 class. I would imagine that he's going to continue to try to recruit the high school kids, but you're going to need to rely on the portal for at least 2 to 3 years in order to get your depth chart where you want it. I mean, just you're going to have to rely on it. I don't think any coach that wants to be somewhere for any kind of period of time is going to rely on that for a long time. You're going to see coaches that are looking to move on quickly, use it heavily to build up quickly, win, and go. But any coach that has a desire to stay somewhere for a long time is not going to rely on the portal to that degree. That's why you don't see Kirby doing it. It's why you don't see Ohio State doing it. It's why you don't see Michigan doing it. You don't see Notre Dame doing it. You don't see Bama doing it. Now, these teams are absolutely, the exception of Clemson, taking advantage of the portal. Ohio State starting left tackle is a transfer. Chip Trayanum is a transfer. They had some guys last year that were they've gone to the portal for kids. Davidson I can't pronounce his last name. The corner, he's a transfer kid. Jahad Carter came in. He's a transfer kid. Tanner McAllister last year was a transfer kid. But Michigan's gotten transfers. They have like two offensive linemen, two or three offensive linemen this year. Their center from last year. They've got some defensive players. Mike Dana a few years ago was a grad transfer. They've been able to go to the portal, but Notre Dame, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they've all been more targeted in how they've gone to the portal. Hey, we need a quarterback. Let's go get a quarterback. We need some depth at defensive end. We need a big end. Let's go to the portal and get that. Man, we really need a nickel. We lost Tariq Bracy. Let's go find that. They're not building their team around the transfer portal in that regard. So I think those things are important. Those things are what you're going to do if your goal is to be somewhere for a while. Because I don't think any of the coaches of those programs are at those schools thinking, okay, let me go win for a year so I can springboard into this next job. Those are all destination jobs. And so the destination coaches are using the portal to fill needs, but still very much building around high school recruiting. The coaches that I believe either inherited terrible rosters like Dion, or coaches that are trying to win quickly for other opportunities, which is what I think ultimately is some of Lincoln Riley's motivation. Those guys are going to look at the portal much differently, which is I'm going to use this sucker to win as big as I can early so I can springboard for somewhere else. I don't want to. I don't know that that's Coach Sanders' desire. It's more of an assumption. He may love it there. I mean, I've heard he owns like a ranch down in like Texas or somewhere, like Florida or something like that. I forget where Coach Sanders lives now. Like it's his main home, but everyone's like got a ranch and all that kind of stuff. Like he seems to be a guy that likes the kind of countryside that Colorado can provide. Maybe he wants to be different. Maybe he doesn't want to coach in the SEC. Maybe he wants to be somewhere he gets some kids out of that region. I don't know. I don't know what his desires are. I hope it's to stay at Colorado for a long time. I like it when coaches go somewhere, build it up, and stay there. But my expectation is that he's not going to be there a super long time. And I hope I'm wrong about that, to be completely honest with you, because it'd be fun to see him stay there. And it would help the Big 12 a ton if Deion Sanders stays at Colorado, a ton, because it makes that league, his presence alone makes that league far more valuable. Far more valuable. Jacob Bramwell, give examples of how you chart games for a breakdown, i.e. notes on play to go back and break down. Well, Jacob, I have like kind of a running list, right? So each play I'm tracking, I'm down distance, personnel, what the concept was, what the play was. And if I need to check something, I literally just put a star by it, or I'll make a little dot on it. And then in between series, I'll have on my computer, I'll have that up, and I'll have like the stat sheet. I'll have my notes, and then beside me, I'll have my iPad, and my iPad usually has the game. Now, sometimes I'll have the game on my computer, and I'll have it, kind of juxtaposed with the live stats, and I'll break it down that way. And so what I do is I usually like pause it right before the series starts, and then I'll watch the series live, and look up at the TV if I need to see like a replay real quick in between plays. But if I don't, then what I'll do is in between each series, I'll kind of go back, look at the line, look at something that maybe I didn't see. That's why I focus on the things that the camera doesn't get. I'll focus on live. Now, what happened? What happened on that run play? I'm watching what the receivers and the DBs were doing. I don't know what happened. I don't know what that -2 was about. I may look up at the screen. They show the replay. Oh, that's what happened. Or in between series, I'll go back and watch it and kind of look at what happened. And that's kind of how I do my breakdowns. And then when I'm breaking them down after the game, I literally just go play by play and chart all my statistics and all my data. That's how I handle that one. John Climate needs a tailgating flagpole and then fly the colors. Yeah, I don't have a flagpole. I'm just going to be honest with you. I will not have a IB flag hanging. I just haven't had the time or thought of doing that. But if any of you have a flagpole and you want to come by, I certainly have the flag. I will have my IB flag there. It'll be hanging from the tent. We'll have a big Notre Dame tent we'll have out behind the trucks, and we'll be good to go. Also, if anybody has a general stadium lot pass that you're looking to sell, DM me or email me, because I'm looking for one. I thought I was going to have two. The person that I was going to get two from, we had a miscommunication. He gave me an extra one last night. I thought that was my second, but the person who normally gives me the one did not give me one, so I only have one. But I thought we're gonna have two, but I'd like two so we can kind of have a real nice big setup. So if any of you are looking to sell a general stadium lot pass, let me know. I'll buy it from you. Rob Osgood says, when was the last time Notre Dame had the advantage at quarterback in a big game? Boy, that is a really good question. I mean, 2015 they did not. The only big game they really played in 2015 they did not. 2020 they did not. 29. I mean, I don't count Wisconsin in 2021 as a big game. So I have to. I really honestly cannot remember when that was. Yeah, I mean, like I said, 2017 they never did. 2015, nope. I mean, you probably have to go back to, when Brady was the quarterback, and even then, it's like, he's going against Matt Leinart in one game and Troy Smith in the other. So it's been a long time. It's been a very long time. I would argue. You know what? Here's when it was. It was 2020 when Trevor Lawrence was ruled out because of COVID against Clemson in 2020, and they had to start DJ Uiagalelei. Notre Dame had the advantage, and not the DJ. I mean, he had a big game statistically, but he didn't make like the money plays when it mattered the way Ian did in that game because Ian was so much more experienced. So I'd say 2020 against Clemson when Trevor was ruled out. That was the last time Notre Dame had a quarterback advantage in a big game. That's a good one. Raheem Pelham says, what player on Notre Dame has the chance to increase their national profile more with a big game? Estimate Hartman, Estimate, or Morrison? Well, I think despite the fact he's a preseason All-American, I think Benjamin Morrison is still not viewed as like an elite corner when the way people talk about like Will Johnson and Kalen King. So, him to a degree, Estimate starting to get a bit of love. If he goes off, he could be one. Of those three guys, I would probably go with Estimate. Just because Sam Hartman's a pretty known commodity. I think the only way it's Hartman is if Sam goes out and just, lights Ohio State up, because his profile would go from being a really good quarterback that's like a dark horse Heisman contender to this dude is a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender to win it. And that game on October was at 14th becomes huge when it comes to the Heisman Trophy and the playoff race when it's him versus Caleb Williams. So I think Sam has the best chance, like if he goes off. But people are just now starting to get a little taste of Audric Estime. And if he goes out and just goes off in this game with a big game, let's say he rushes for 150 yards, all of a sudden his profile skyrockets. Whereas like with Benjamin Morrison, he'll get talked about, but Benjamin Morrison will get talked about more by the nerds like me, the people that like really study the film. He won't be talked about by the people that just look at the stats and watch the game on TV. Like the guys that like really dive into the film. And, I'm trying like Jonathan Vilma and Dan Orlovsky and Greg McElroy, guys like that really like, to me, seem like they really study film. Those guys are going to watch like, dude, this number 20 for Notre Dame is legit. But most of the talking heads don't watch that to that degree. So I don't know. And what I mean is like Benjamin Morrison, if he plays a great game, you're not going to see him. You're not going to hear his name, like probably the whole game, unless Ohio State keeps throwing at him and he has 2 picks again. But if Audric but then it's like, well, I had preseason All-American. Some of you were waking up to him. But Audric could go from, a guy that we're just now starting to hear about a little bit to that's the best running back in college football if he goes off on Saturday. I'm not saying he is, but that'll be the reputation. And I kept thinking, man, like if he goes off on Saturday night, he's going to have a legit shot to win the Doak. And I just remember thinking like, man, this kid is just a unique kid. Because you guys remember after the 2021 season ended, do you remember after Notre Dame lost to Oklahoma State in a game where Audric Estime carried the ball, I believe, one time for negative yards? I'm going to go look at that, just make sure that I'm accurate, because I think he carried the ball in that game one time for negative yards. Just give me a second. He might have carried it twice. Just I want to be accurate, so just give me a second here. He carried the ball in 2021 against Oklahoma State one time for -1 yards. The only other time he touched the ball that entire season, he had 6 carries for 61 yards against Georgia Tech. That is it. And after that game, Audric Estime tweeted out that he was going to win the Doak Walker Award. Like, seriously. He tweeted out on after that game he's going to win it. Like, the kid just had 1 yard for like -1 carry, you know? So it's pretty interesting. So anyway, that could be a bit of a breakout performance for me. Hold on 1 second. So 1 second. Always a million things going on during the show. All right, let's go here. Tyler Ehrig with a question. Thank you, Tyler. He says, Is there anything about what Jim Knowles does schematically that has you worried, or any parts of you think ND can exploit?" Well, I mean, I think the middle of the field, some of the things that Notre Dame has been vulnerable to with how they play is also something Ohio State's a little vulnerable to. All layers of the middle of the field. That's where Notre Dame exploited Oklahoma State 2 years ago. Now, I know that Oklahoma State was not coordinated by Jim Knowles. I understand that. I'm not saying that's a Jim Knowles thing, but it was still his defense, and it was still the same philosophy. And look where Notre Dame had success. You had the inside post route by Lorenzo Styles Jr. for a touchdown. You had the blitz beater right behind the pressure to Chris Tyree for a 50-plus yard touchdown. Notre Dame had a lot of success throwing the ball over the middle of the field that game, and it's similar there. There's times if you can get in one-on-ones where you think you have an outside matchup, you can do that if they're bringing the safeties down. If he is blitzing a lot, like Notre Dame, you can catch him in the right call. You can gash it. Michigan did that great last year. But if they play more basic, it just comes down to you need your dudes to execute better than their dudes and play harder than their dudes and be better than their dudes. That's what it comes down to. And that's what I like about what he's done so far this year. What he does schematically that could give me problems is, we talked about it earlier, Tyler, is he does a good job of putting a lot of stress on centers and guards with his line games and second level pressures. A lot of aggressive quick twists, a lot of slants that are really fast and get after you. And the linebackers time stuff up really well. They don't just bring quick slants where you see it. Like if the linebacker's stacked right here over the center, and there's a shade here, and he goes here, and that guy goes there, I can see that pretty easily as a quarterback and as an alignment. But he does a lot of stuff where he'll slant the 3 technique across and then bring the backside backer around. And sometimes you don't see it in time to pick it up. Now it's a longer pressure, but it's effective because the quarterback is at the top of his drop. He sees over here, and all of a sudden, boom, the linebacker's hitting him from behind. So it's stuff like that where he really stresses the interior of the line. That's really where it can be a problem, in my opinion, for sure. So, all right, let's get to some more questions here. Irish Gordian Knott says, if you could pick a single Notre Dame skill player to have their best game, who would it be? Well, kind of answered this already, IGK. It really comes down to one of the Chris Tyree or Tobias Merriweather, and I would probably go with Tyree being the bigger one for me. That would probably be. That would probably be it, because I just think the things he could do in this game could really be damaging schematically. That opens up other opportunities. But honestly, between him and Tyree, him and Tobias having their best game, and the reason I pick them over like Jaden Thomas, for example, is because if Jaden Thomas has a big game, he's money, right? He's like 9 catches for 120 yards. He's converting third downs. He's getting red zone touchdowns. He's blocking his butt off, and it's impactful. It's very impactful. But if it's Tobias or Tyree, it's 120 yards on like 4 carries, 2 touchdowns. It's over the top. It's big plays. It's stuff that makes Ohio State say, we can't keep doing that anymore because they're just going to kill us with big plays. It's that kind of thing, which that tends to force a defense out of what they're doing more. And then all of a sudden that opens up Jaden Thomas, that opens up the run game, that opens up the tight ends. And that's kind of, to me, where I look at it and say, hey, this is where those guys could have a major impact if they can just go off and have like a 4-catch, 100-plus yard game where they have like rip off 2 big plays and, that kind of performance that can really, really scare a team out of what they're trying to do. And the same thing is true on the flip side. It's like if, one of their receivers is beating you over the top, it's like, man, you got to You can't keep doing that. You can't keep giving up 60-yard play. You're giving up 3 plays of 50 yards or more in this game. You can't do that, right? Like, you think of the Clemson game in 2020, and if you really break the game down, you're like, how did Clemson rack up that many yards? Like, I don't even remember them really being overly efficient in that game. You're like, they weren't. And they didn't run the ball very well that game. They didn't. Well, how did Clemson stay in that game? Because they hit a bunch of big plays in the pass game. Was it Cornell Powell hit a couple big plays? Armani Rogers beat Notre Dame for a big gain on a third down. It was those big plays in the pass game that helped them stay in that game. And you take those away, and that game's not close. It isn't. Notre Dame blows them out, beats it by 17, 24 points. It was like 23 to 10 at one point in time. Like, Notre Dame was on them pretty good. And then they just big play, and they're right back in it. And that's the thing you've got to avoid against. Both teams have to try to avoid in this game. Matt Lee asks, hey, Brian, a coworker of mine today at work said he hopes we go with 8 in the secondary to make it harder for the young quarterback to have a harder time in the passing game. And so what say you? No. And by 8 in secondary, I'm assuming he means dropping 8 so the linebackers drop it on. No, I don't want to do that, because if you're going to do that, I think Ohio State's probably licking their chops. If you're going to drop 8, they're just going to say, fine, we're going to just run it on you all day. I mean, I don't think they're opposed to that. I don't think this is a really physical Ohio State team. But schematically, if you're just going to drop and bail all day, they'll run their stretch and their wraps and their inside zones just at you all day and just gash you. I don't think they're opposed to that. I mean, that's what they did to Notre Dame last year when Notre Dame was giving them a really hard time in the pass game. They just said, okay, we're just going to start leaning on you and run the football. So look, the way that your coworker, I shouldn't say him. I don't know that you said him in there, but your coworker's point about making it harder on the young quarterback is valid. I just think dropping 8 all day is going to be the answer. Now, are there times on 3rd and 7 when you show heavy pressure and drop 8? That I can live with, because as a mix-up, because you may get him thinking like, hey, I'm going to throw the slant route right behind this guy, and then all of a sudden Maris Leofau drops underneath the slant, picks it off or something like that, or Xavier Watts does or something. Like, that's more of a mix-up, though, but it's not like your base defense. But it's showing one pre-snap look and rolling to something different. Showing off coverage and coming up to take away the quick game. Showing press and then bailing to protect against this. Safety's playing here, and then they're rolling this way, that way. Linebackers coming up, and sometimes they come, sometimes they smoke. There's different things that you can do, bringing pressure from depth, linebacker depth, not safety depth. Bringing corner fires every now and then. If you know, like, hey, when they line up in this alignment, we know with pretty good certainty that the back is blocking field side in a 3-by-1, right? So, or releasing field side in a certain look. And so we know if we bring our linebacker, if our edge smashes right into the face of the tackle, we know we can bring a corner fire and he won't see it. And you got like one shot at that, and you got to time it perfectly. And, something like that, that's the kind of, it's doing stuff like that can really give problems to a young quarterback, is where he's thinking, he's not sure, he's uncertain of what he's seeing. That's when you start having success. But dropping 8 all game is Ohio State will just say, fine, we'll just run it at you all day. Run screens, we'll just run it at you. And he's going to sit in the pocket and have a lot of time to throw. And I don't care how many guys you're dropping. If a quarterback's got all time to throw, he's going to find somebody, especially when he's got the receivers that Ohio State has. Sly Fox 110404. Do you think a big key is Zeke, Pat, and Rocco? Absolutely. Talked about that in a little bit in an article I wrote yesterday, Sly Fox. But yes, and then I talked about the guards being a big key to success in my Wednesday show. So yes, absolutely. John Lawn asks, if Notre Dame wins this game, are they a real championship contender? Sure, of course. I mean, if they lose in a close game, they're still a contender, because they'll be in a top 10 team. By the time the playoff committee comes out, they'll have a win over USC if they win that game, just hypothetically speaking. So there's still plenty of opportunities for them to build a playoff resume. This makes it a lot harder. Both of these teams can lose tomorrow night and still be a playoff team. There's no doubt. You just can't lose anymore. but both of them have enough big games. I mean, Penn State has 2 games against top 10 teams left. Notre Dame would have at least one top 10 team left on their schedule. In USC plus Duke's going to be a top 20 team. Clemson, if they can win this weekend, they could end up being a top 10 team when it's all said and done by that point in time. So they'll both have plenty of big games left on their schedule. Just makes it a lot harder. The winner, absolutely, is a championship contender. Whoever wins this game is certainly that, and that includes Notre Dame. Stevie Wonder, what's the schedule for home night games for the players? How do they fill their time without getting drained? I don't know. I mean, usually you just chill. They're at a team hotel. They'll do different functions. They'll have like breakfast in the morning, have some early meetings, and probably go chill for a little bit, maybe watch some of the noon games, then come back for more meetings later. And a lot of the meetings will just be kind of like check-in type things and just go over a couple things. You don't want to put too much on them mentally. It's just about making sure that they're staying on the game, and you just really let them have some downtime. Just let them relax, let them watch some college football, maybe let them see their families at the hotel, stuff like that. And then you'll have a team dinner before you head over to the stadium. And usually you'll have a team dinner, obviously. There'll be like snack bar most likely during the day too, where they can kind of get their their proper nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So it's usually just hanging around the hotel until they head over to the stadium. Okay. Dexter Domer says, would you take our current coaching staff or last year's coaching staff going into a game like this? It's this year's coaching staff for a host of reasons, but primarily because your entire staff, including your head football coach, has a second year of experience together. I love what Jared Parker's done. Obviously I would love if Coach Easton was still at Notre Dame. You guys know my feelings on Coach Easton, but give me year 2 of Marcus Freeman over year 1 of Marcus Freeman. Give me year 2 of this defensive staff together over year 1 of this defensive staff together. Give me Max Bulla over James Laurinaitis. And this is no disrespect to James Laurinaitis, who's a very smart guy. But, year 1 as a coach versus year 4, right? Max Bulla has a lot more experience as a coach. Give me year 2 of Deland McCullough and Chancey Stuckey and Jared Parker over year 1 of those guys. So that's a no-brainer. The only big losses are Coach Easton and Brian Mason. Brian Mason's a huge loss. And the special team so far has been very average so far. It's got to get better. Coach Easton's loss is big, but I don't really have a lot of complaints with the O-line right now. And tomorrow night's one of those opportunities for us to be able to look and say, okay, do they really miss Coach Easton? Or, hey, you know what? Coach Easton did a great job, getting them out of the Quinn era and setting the stage. And now Coach Rudolph has come in and taken that sucker to another level. We're going to find that answer out tomorrow. And hopefully that we find out in a positive way that, hey, you know what? Coach Easton laid the foundation. Now Coach Rudolph is building on it, and he's going to keep this thing rolling and take it to another level. That's what you're hoping for. Cajun Irish says, I'm worried about a block PAT or field goal could be an issue. Have you noticed how long it takes our kicker to get the ball off? Haven't really noticed it being an issue, to be honest with you. He also has a very high release on it, so it's not as big of an issue in that regard either, in my opinion. But I'll pay more attention to it tomorrow. But it's not something that I've noticed. It's like struck. I'm not saying it's not happening or not true. It's just I haven't noticed that. Bubba Test Live. Irish first offensive play is an outside run, inside run, or pass. Depends on what look you're seeing. For me, I would probably want it to be some kind of run. I'd probably want it to be an outside run. I would want Ohio State to think, hey, we're going to kind of come at you the same way we have. Maybe run a toss or something like that. It would set up a couple other things that I want to do later in the game, but I would probably run the football. Now, if I throw it, it would be off an RPO. If they're going to, give me the boundary and play off coverage and have that window open, and I can just bang a 6-yard hitch route into the boundary, or, a little quick, screen against off coverage, a little now to the field, a little quick slide to the field off RPO because they're crashing their rover. That's fine, but it would be more of an RPO type look. That's what I would do if it was me. But I don't really care as long as it's effective. You just need that first play to work. That's the big key. Gideon Rosa, how good do you think Sean Crawford would have been had he not had so many injuries? That is, what was his projection coming out of high school? You think about this, Gideon. It's a good question. Sean Crawford was a starter on a playoff team after having 2 knee surgery, ACL injuries, and an Achilles injury. Think about that. Like, for that kid to have the career he had, forget what he could have been, to have the career he had after suffering an Achilles and 2 torn ACLs speaks volumes about the kind of freaky athlete he was. And he did it at 5'8", 5'9", at the tallest, right? That kid was one of the most unique athletes I've ever seen. Also a great kid, a guy that you just really root for, honestly, in a lot of different ways to be successful. Actually, he didn't start on the playoff team because he was the 2018 playoff team. I thought he was, but he was actually injured again that year. But he did play a ton on that. He was a starter on the 2020 playoff team, but he was a big factor in 2017. I mean, and I mean, he was a top 100 recruit. I mean, he would have had issues with size at times, but he was fast. He was physical. He was explosive, and he was one of the most high football IQ DBs Notre Dame has had in a long time. Like, his football IQ to me was even better than Julian Love's. That's how good it was. But he just couldn't always get where he wanted to get to. I mean, didn't he run like a 4.4 or something at the pro day? I believe he did. I believe Sean Crawford ran like a 4.4 something at the Notre Dame pro day. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna look this up real quick. Yeah, he ran a 4.47 at Notre Dame's pro day. Now you say that's not really all that fast for a DB. Guys, he had 2 torn ACLs and a torn Achilles in his career, and he still went out and ran a 4.47 after all that. He was an amazing athlete, but Sean was a tough kid, and he's a really smart kid as well. And that's what allowed him to still be a good football player, even when he was limited athletically, because he lost some speed with the injuries, but what really hurt him is he lost a lot of the explosiveness and the change of direction. He lost a lot of that when he had the injuries. That's something that hurt him. Irish Gordy Knott, if Notre Dame wins tomorrow, do you predict to make the playoff? Look, I predict them to make the playoff before the season, so I'm not going to change my mind if they beat Ohio State. I'll just say this. I'm not worried about the playoff yet if they beat Ohio State. There's still some major mountains you've got to climb. You've got to show me that you can bounce back from the win and be focused against Duke and Louisville. You got to show me that, Ohio State's one animal, one test, but Caleb Williams is a whole different animal. USC is a whole different animal. And then there's still Clemson. There's still Pitt. There's still Wake Forest. There's a lot of hurdles to clear, man. Mountains to climb. Pick whatever phrase you want to use. Beating Ohio State is a great, great win, but it's just one win. You need 11 or 12 to get to the playoff. It's just one. It means a lot, but it's still just one. You got to handle your business the rest of the way, or it doesn't mean as much. I mean, if Notre Dame beats Ohio State and then loses 2-3 more games, guess what? This Ohio State game gets negated. Ohio State just wasn't that good, right? You've got to handle your business. So I'm just going to enjoy tomorrow. If they win, I'm just going to enjoy that for a couple days, and then we can focus on what's next later. Dexter Domer, if you win the coin toss, do you kick or receive? I would receive. Look, it's what I always say. It's whatever your team philosophy is, whatever your head coach's philosophy is. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think this particular team, with who Marcus Freeman is always seems to have kind of like, hey, we want our defense to establish the tone of the game. So I would imagine Notre Dame would defer to the second half, which would then allow Ohio State to obviously would choose to receive, because they're not going to choose to kick, because then Notre Dame would start both halves with the football. I saw that once, but I believe this team is geared more towards get your defense out there, let them kind of start things off. That would be what I would assume that they would do. But look, guys, I don't care as much about that as other people do. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what's the DNA of your football team. I've always personally been more partial to let me get the ball and let me go score and go up 1-0. But I'm an offensive coach. Right? I've never been a head coach. I look at it as from an offensive coach. I've put together this game plan. I don't want to get on the field down 3-0 or 7-0 the first time we touch the football. I want them to get on the field the first time they touch the football down 7-0, down 3-0. But again, that's because I'm an offensive coach. That's why I looked at it that way. I would assume our defensive coordinator felt differently. I would assume our defensive coordinator was like, I don't want to get on the field for the first time when we're already down 7-0 or 3-0. I want to come out there and I want to set the tone, and I want to get you guys the football with a chance to put us up. And then we can start the second half and go that way. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. Go Irish asks, how are the refs determined for our games? How do they determine which conference will provide the refs for each game? It's always been in the past, and this might have changed recently, but I don't believe that it is, that the road team provides the officials. Now, what I'm not certain of, and honestly, I haven't asked this because it's usually not something I care a whole lot about, to be completely honest with you, because every conference has bad officials. It used to be where the opposing team would provide their officials. With Notre Dame being a member of the ACC, there have been times, I believe, where we've actually seen ACC officials at home. But that could just be because a lot of those teams were ACC teams. But I believe that the on-field officials usually tend to come from the conference that the team that Notre Dame is playing. So I would assume, again, this is just an assumption, I don't know for a fact, I would assume that the field officials are going to be Big Ten officials, and then the booth will most likely be ACC officials. That's my understanding. And, I would assume that would be the case. Brandon Pietz asks, how imperative do you think a fast start is tomorrow? A very. I mean, and Brandon, I would encourage you to listen to our show yesterday. We talked a lot about that. It's big for confidence for you. It's going to get the crowd into the game. It quiets the Ohio State crowd. If you're able to start fast on both sides of the ball and maybe jump up to a 14-0 lead, it puts a little bit of pressure on Ohio State. So yeah, fast starts. I mean, fast start is huge in football, especially when you're playing a team like Ohio State. It's incredibly important. Tatted Up Irishman, if Notre Dame and Ohio State is tied at halftime, which coaching staff do you believe is better at halftime adjustments? I mean, do we really know right now? I mean, do we really know? Because right now, so far this season, once halftime has come, both of these teams have been up pretty convincingly. You're not making a ton of halftime adjustments. I think this Notre Dame offensive staff has shown some good adjustments the couple times they've needed to. I thought they did some really nice things at halftime of the NC State game. Notre Dame came out and scored, what was it, 28 points in the second half after only getting 17 the first half. But you also have to look at the Notre Dame game against NC State, and they almost kind of like two opportunities for halftime adjustments because of that long delay. They made some adjustments then, and then they come out and the first drive, they go for an 80-yard touchdown. So clearly there were some adjustments made, but Notre Dame started to kind of show those adjustments coming out of the first break of that game. Because if you think about it, that was Notre Dame's first drive of the second quarter. It was nothing at the end of the first quarter, and then Notre Dame comes out in the next quarter, that second quarter, and scored 17 points. So to me, I thought that was an example of that Notre Dame coaching staff showing making adjustments during a break. Now, it wasn't halftime adjustments, but it was adjustments. So actually, I'm sorry, it was 3-0. So Notre Dame actually was up 3-0 in the first quarter. They did score in the first quarter. It was 3-0. But you come out of the halftime break, or not the halftime break, but the rain delay, and you come out on your first drive and you go 80 yards for a touchdown on that drive. They go down and get points. You trade punts a couple times, and then NC State scores late in the half. Notre Dame had a missed field goal in that period of time, so they were moving the ball a little bit better, a little bit more effectively, and then of course they come out and get that touchdown drive. So at halftime, Notre Dame has 263 total yards and 17 points. They had rushed for they'd gone 9 of 16 for 151 yards throwing the football. They come out in the third quarter, get a touchdown they get a touchdown in the second half. They come out in the fourth quarter, a couple turnovers helps them put the game away. So, I mean, I think we saw some good adjustments in that game. It didn't always work. The execution wasn't always great, but I thought we saw some good adjustments. I thought the defense made some good adjustments in game in the second half of that game. That's the only opportunity we've really seen to see a lot of adjustments. At halftime, it's 20-0 at halftime against Navy. You're not worried about adjustments. It was, what was it, like 42? What was the score at halftime of the Central Michigan game or the East Tennessee State game? Didn't they have like 42 points? Yeah, it was 35-3 at halftime. There's no adjustments being made there. Central Michigan, you had to make some adjustments. I thought the offense came out second half. You had 21 points at halftime. Came out, scored 10 points in the third quarter. you had some you had some mistakes that hurt you, but I thought the adjustments were good. They were running like this backside power play in the first half. They came out second half, first 2 plays of the second half, traditional power went right at them. And, I thought made some good adjustments in the second half. Ohio State hasn't needed a ton of adjustments, so I don't know that we really know. And you can say, well, Ohio State's coaching more experience. That's fine, but this is a different team. Every year's a different year. Every team's different. So I don't know that we know. It could be a very important part of this game, though. Bobby S., is McCord totally immobile, and how do we use his lack of running threat to our advantage? I don't think he's immobile at all. Kyle McCord's a decent athlete for a pocket passer. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and run a lot of power read. He's not going to run a million read zone plays. He's not going to scramble for 120 yards unless you're just completely undisciplined and give him those type of things. But he's not some stiff back in the pocket who can't move either. And he's got positive yards on the season. He's at plus 10 so far in the season. So, he's not a guy that's just sitting. He's been sacked 3 times. Let me look at the numbers. He's been sacked 3 times. Not a lot of minus yards, to be honest with you, for Ohio State, those sacks, but he's plus on the season. So no, he's not an immobile kid, and he's the type of kid that if you're not disciplined on third down and you lose contain on rush lanes, he can step into the pocket and move the chains. That's where he's dangerous, in my opinion. How do you use his lack of running threat? I mean, it doesn't really impact this game because the way Ohio State plays, the mobile quarterback isn't really a thing. And I wouldn't be shocked if they wanted to get some runs from the quarterback if they throw Devin Brown out there just to mess with Notre Dame, since they didn't do it last week, just to give Notre Dame something else to think about. I personally wouldn't do it, but it wouldn't shock me if they did it. Andrew Gilmore says, if you are Marcus Freeman's agent and Notre Dame beats Ohio State, are you calling Pete Bavacqua on Monday morning to discuss a contract extension? I think Notre Dame's admin might be overreactionary from losing Kelly and Lubbock. No, I wouldn't call Pete Bavacqua because I don't believe Pete Bavacqua is the AD yet. I believe Jack Swarbrick is still the DA, correct? That transition's not happening until later, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I don't believe his transition has happened yet. I got the release here. So Jack Swarbrick's going to step down in 2024, sometime in 2024. So as of right now, Pete Bavacqua has no authority to negotiate that deal. So if you're going to call, you need to call Jack Swarbrick. If I'm Jack Swarbrick, I would say, great win, great job. You're not getting an extension simply for beating Ohio State. Let's go beat USC and Clemson. I need to finish the season. I think that would be a bit of a blunder on Marcus Freeman's agent's part to, after one game, to make that call and to try to begin negotiating. I think that would be a mistake. Now, does that mean you may not shoot some texts, have some fun about it? Sure. That can be, but you're not beginning. To me, I wouldn't, dude, you're not paid to go 5-0 at Notre Dame. You're paid to win a championship. You're not even halfway through the season. Call me after USC. Maybe then we might start talking about scheduling a meeting after the season, and that would be it. And I would hope that Marcus Freeman's not on the phone. Hey, go give me a pay raise. I think Marcus Freeman's got much bigger things on his mind. Jordan Rangel asks, what is the individual versus individual matchup you are most looking forward to that may have a significant outcome on the game? Well, I've talked a lot about the guard play, so I'll go with something different here on this one. I'm really curious to see how the Notre Dame receivers stack up against the Ohio State DBs. The Notre Dame receivers have been very good complementary players so far, but they have not shown themselves to be game changers. And yes, I know they did last week, but that's Central Michigan. This is a whole different animal. I liked CMU's corners for the MAC. They're not playing at Notre Dame. I mean, they're not playing at Ohio State or Notre Dame or the better teams in the schedule. They're not. They're sitting on the bench. Can you do what you did last week against Denzel Burke? Can you do it against Davison? Can you do it against Jordan Hancock? Can you do it against Josh Proctor? Can you do it against Lathan Ransom? That's still a TBD, in my opinion. So that's the individual matchup to me that I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to early. Ethan Bodnord, thank you, Ethan. Love the show. Keep up the great work. I have a great feeling about tomorrow. It's going to be special. Go Irish. I hope you are right. Nathan Lytle says, when the Irish win tomorrow night, who gets the game ball on offense or defense? Well, Nathan, we did this in yesterday's show. So if you want to hear a breakdown as to why, listen to our game prediction show. If you're subscribed to our podcast channel, we have the game prediction show. So just so you guys know, because I hear people crying about this sometimes, and you guys don't break your shows down on YouTube. Okay, well we use YouTube differently. We do YouTube for our live shows. We break down our shows on our podcast app. So we'll take, like yesterday, we have a Keys to Victory on offense is one pod. We have our Keys to Victory on defense is one pod. We have the intro period where we talk about what's at stake for Notre Dame is a different pod. And then our game predictions is another pod with our mailbag on that particular one. So like this mailbag will probably break down into 3 or 4 different parts. Usually we go a part per hour. So the podcast app, so the Irish Breakdown podcast app, you can find it on all your podcast platforms. That's the best place to get them when they're broken down. So I would encourage you to listen to that or watch yesterday's video and find it where we talk about why. But my prediction was either Tobias or Tyree. I believe it was Tobias or Sam Hartman on offense, and it was Jordan Patel on defense. That's who mine was yesterday. Joe Papiti asks, I just can't help but think that this game will come down to our O-line, especially versus the blitz, which I think Ohio State will dial up, and also how well our linebackers play. Thoughts? Joe, look, to win a game like this, it's going to come down to a lot of things. These things right here are A-list things. The offensive line's got to play well. They got to handle the pressures. They've got to play straight up. I do think there will be times that Ohio State's going to be challenging their name, say, hey, we don't think you're better than us. So we're going to pressure, but we're not going to be exotic and do crazy stuff a whole game because we think we can beat you with our front four. I think Ohio State will test Notre Dame in that regard. And Notre Dame's got to handle it. And because the more that they kick Notre Dame's butt with 4, the more they're going to do it. And that makes it a lot harder to throw the ball, makes it harder to get the ball outside. It just hurts your whole offense. You need to force them to start bringing pressures. That's what you need to do. And then on the other side, the linebackers got to play well in coverage and run game. They've got to hit home on blitzes. I mean, Al Golden runs a linebacker-centered, linebacker-focused defense. And if your linebackers don't play well and your defense is built around them, it's a bad sign. Very bad sign. The history expert, replace Sam Hartman with 2005 Brady Quinn tomorrow. Are you more confident in the game, less confident, or about the same? I mean, it's so hard to answer this question, and I get where you're coming from, but like it's hard for me to go back to where Brady Quinn was in 05 in game 5. Like did we view Brady Quinn then after game 5 the same way that we do now? I don't know that we did. Brady threw for 227 yards against Pitt, touchdown and a pick. They ran the ball on Pitt. He only threw for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns against Michigan. Threw for 487 yards and 5 touchdowns against Michigan State, but they lost that game. Did well against Washington the next week, went 25 of 37 for 327 yards and 1 touchdown and a win. So at that time, then going into game 5 against Purdue to me was sort of his really big breakout game. He threw for 443 touchdowns in a road night game on ESPN against a Purdue team that at the time I believe was ranked. He went 29 of 36. And then, of course, the next week he played really well against USC. But for me, it's like at that time, was Brady Quinn better after 4 games in 2005 than what Sam Hartman has shown himself to be, not just now, but throughout his career? Sam Hartman's been the better player. I mean, Brady Quinn was coming off of a year in 2004, where he wasn't that great of a player. I mean, he had good talent, but Notre Dame was not a very good team. Brady, I thought, played well in the what's it called, like the Insight.com Bowl or something like that. Some kind of whoever they played against Oregon State that year. But Brady the year before threw for 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 10 picks. In his career coming into 05, Brady Quinn had 26 touchdowns and 26 passing touchdowns and 25 interceptions. So after 4 games of 2005, I don't know that we knew that Brady was who he became at that point in time yet. So trying to look at it from that standpoint, I'd go with Sam Hartman easily if you say what we knew that Brady Quinn to be, I don't know, man. Like, I just feel like going with Brady would be disrespectful to Sam, and I think Brady would tell you that. It's like this is Sam's team. This isn't my team, and I just feel like it'd be a little disrespectful to Sam. Let's give Sam Hartman his chance to have that money game, because like this is Sam's USC moment. And Brady did, and I don't fault Brady Quinn for Notre Dame losing that game. I mean, Brady Quinn did everything he could do to win that game. I mean, led them on a late drive. They got a lead with a couple minutes left, and did everything he needed to do. Threw a big pass to Anthony Stovall or Anthony Fasano that should have got him, down the field for a chance to put even more distance on him, and the ball gets stripped out. And so I thought Brady Quinn played his butt off that game. They still lost, So this is Sam's team, and I want to see what Sam can do with it. To be honest with you. Robert Matajic, I hope I'm saying that right, Robert. Regarding scheduling, is long-term prognostication possible? Do ADs consult coaches project advantageous matchups? Can administration short-term revenue goals trump long-term vision? Many things. On the latter part, absolutely, because a lot of times that's all that they're focused on. A good AD is not. A good AD is going to talk to the head coach and say, hey, look, talk to me about what we need. Because not every head coach is going to say, hey, schedule me a bunch of garbage. A good head coach is going to say, hey, listen, I want to play the first month of the season somebody really good, but let's try to have it, be week 4, week 3. Don't have me have a huge rough road game. So there needs to be some method to the madness of who you schedule. But at the same time, I mean, financial considerations also have to be taken into account. And, especially when you're like Notre Dame, you're trying to make sure your TV company is happy. You got to make sure you're looking at home schedules and home slates saying, hey, projecting 6 years from now, boy, I don't know what kind of team this team and this team and this team is going to be, but I do know this, so if we're talking, this is 2016 and you're looking forward to scheduling your 2023 schedule, you're like, I don't know how good, USC is going to be because they weren't good at the time. Their fan base is kind of fickle. I don't know how good, Central Michigan's not very good, so that's going to be more of a tune-up game, and so is Tennessee State. Let's say you knew that. I don't know how good Pitt's going to be. I don't know how good Wake's going to be. But you know what? I don't care how good they are. That Ohio State, that's going to be a big audience, right? So if you're trying to schedule it because I got a TV partner that I need to keep happy that we're going to be, our contract's going to end around that time, that stuff has to matter. It has to matter. You can't just give your football team a bunch of garbage home games in the era that we live in. You have to be thinking about those type of things. But you can't just look at those things at the expense of the football team either. So it can't just be the head coach has all the say, and it can't just be that the AD has all the say. They have to work together in order to make it really work, in my opinion. Illinois Irish 82. Do you expect any verbal commitments coming out of the weekend? I wouldn't say we're going in expecting any, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a couple. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, this guy, and this guy, I think are going to have verbal commitments this weekend. I'm not saying that, but I do think there's some kids on campus that are very high on Notre Dame that have been in sort of potential decision-making mode for a while, that a good visit this weekend, and not even a win, just a good visit this weekend could solidify things, in my opinion. VDub 804 with a question. Brian, if you were Jared Parker or Al Golden, would you study the Ohio State and Michigan game from last year or implement some of the things that Michigan did to defeat Ohio State? I've been asked this a bunch this week, and honestly, I'd study it to a certain degree, and there may be certain philosophical things that I take out of this. But guys, this is not the same Ohio State team. Notre Dame, just like Notre Dame's not the same team. Would we all agree that if Ohio State went back and put a lot of emphasis on the Clemson game, that'd be very good for Notre Dame? Why would we say that? Because this is a completely different team. So if Ohio State was like, look, man, I want to know what Clemson did to hold this Notre Dame offense down to 21 points and only 85 passing yards. And I want to know what Notre Dame did to run for a bunch of yards that game. I want to know. And I'm going to study that game because I want to find out what they did, because we need to make sure we don't make the same mistake. We'd say, well, that's not going to help you a whole lot because last year they ran duo 87 million times, and Notre Dame only runs duo 3-4 times a game now. And, they only threw for 85 yards because of who the quarterback was. And all. You say, no, Notre Dame's a way different team now. Well, so is Ohio State. They don't have C.J. Stroud at quarterback. Their defense is different. You're in year 2 now of this defensive system. He's run it differently so far. So am I going to study it? Sure. You'd be foolish not to study what they did at the end of the year last year. But what you want to do is you want to try to find some things that are okay. They're not showing this year, but based on the structure of what they're doing, this is still something that I believe is in Jim Knowles' bag, and we got to be prepared for it. There's other things that you're like, dude, they did this last year, but this year it'd be so out of character for them to do this. We're not going to worry about it. And it would be more of a tendency type of thing. I'm not building my scheme around it. I'm not building my game plan around it. I'm not saying, well, this is what Michigan did, so let's replicate that, because they are very different football teams. Notre Dame is different from Michigan, and this Ohio State team is not like last year's Ohio State team. Would we all agree that Notre Dame is a much different team now than they were even in November of last year? I think we would all agree that they are. So same with Ohio State. So I'm just not putting a lot on that Michigan game from that regard. Now, are there things that Michigan did that you can carry into it? Yes, but that's more about you being good in the first half, right? So I said this before. Michigan was able to come out, establish the line of scrimmage, keep the points down, philosophical things. That's true against Ohio State now. It'll be true next year. It'll be true the year after that. Have early success, get your run game going, be balanced, and make early stops. That's true against Ohio State, Duke, USC, Georgia. Those things are philosophically true. Michigan didn't come out and do something unique or different from Ohio State. Michigan came out and said, we're going to play our football. And they had built their team to be kryptonite to Ohio State. We're going to be like, and this has been said nationally. We've said it on our show, and it's very true. The mistake Ryan Day made is, in my opinion, when it comes to Michigan, is he stopped worrying about Michigan being a driver of what he was building. And to a degree, you understand it. They won 14 out of 15. But it's turned out to bite him in the butt a little bit. And he said, we're going to build our team to go beat Georgia and Alabama. Which I understand. You're trying to win a championship. You're trying to beat Clemson. You're trying to beat Georgia, Alabama. But Michigan said, we're going to build our team to beat Ohio State. And so we're going to be physical. We're going to be this. We're going to be that, because these are things that Ohio State struggles with, or they're not great at, or we can be great at. And then within his philosophy, of Jim Harbaugh's philosophy, he built that. And that's why you've seen Ohio State be really good against Penn State and Ohio State, but then not look great in the playoff game. And that's just kind of where it is and where it goes. So I just think they were true to who they are. Notre Dame needs to be true to who they are. And then where those two things are similar, there are things that we will see from Notre Dame that you may say, hey, boy, that looks a lot like what Michigan did, but it's not because Notre Dame necessarily got it from the Michigan game plan, but it's more about, this is who we are, that's who they are, and we played our game and executed our game effectively, because a lot of things that Notre Dame wants to do are similar. Play great defense, make stops, be disruptive, run the football, throw the ball vertically. A lot of those things are already naturally who Notre Dame likes to be, and so that's why you may see some similarities, but it's going to be more about that than it will be trying to do what Michigan did to Ohio State. You're Notre Dame. You don't need to repeat that. You need to play your game. That's the key. Christopher Crosby says, I'll be listening back later, heading South Bend. See y'all tomorrow. Tell AG to let Howard Cross loose on the OSU interior line. Christopher, hoping that we'll see you at the tailgate, man. So safe travels coming into South Bend. Robert Bishop says, Brian, do you think a strong Notre Dame performance and hopefully a win might make Justin Scott rethink his decision, or do you feel like he is a solid Ohio State commit? I do not think Justin Scott's a solid Ohio State commit, but I don't think that necessarily means Notre Dame is going to be the team to flip him. I've said this before. Notre Dame was not second, and I think you can even argue they weren't third when Justin Scott made his decision. If he's not on campus this weekend, I would pretty much move on, to be honest with you. He's at a game wearing Georgia gloves. Once kids start playing those kind of games, you got to ask yourself, is this kid really serious about the things that Notre Dame wants anymore? I think at one time, Justin was. Is he now? I don't know. But if he's not at the game this weekend, then it's time to move on, in my opinion. And honestly, if all of a sudden now he wants to look at you because, like let's say it comes down to what your conversation's been like. Has he been receptive to you? Has he been engaged with you? Does he still talk to you, or does he play like hard to get and doesn't really respond to you? If you beat Ohio State and he hasn't been responding to you and hasn't been engaging with you, but now he wants to jump on the bandwagon, I'm good. Run along. If he has been engaging with you, if he has shown interest, if he has still kept that relationship going, and then he shows the interest, then I'm okay with that, because I think that Justin has said, I want to play for a championship. And if Notre Dame can beat Ohio State, it's saying, hey, you know what? Notre Dame can be that team. But as long as the relationship is there, then I'm okay. Come on, buddy. We love you. But if he hasn't been talking to you for a while, then I would just move on, in my opinion. Jacob Watson asks, what unit do you think has to play well for Notre Dame to win? For me, I think it's the DBs. I really think they can match up with the Ohio State receivers. I mean, that's important, right? It is. And I talked about that in an article today. But at the end of the day, I'll always say this. The best way to stop a really good passing team is to dominate them in the trenches. Don't let the quarterback get comfortable, bat balls down, pressure him make mistakes. A lot of times incompletions can happen more because of a great pressure than a great coverage against a team like this. And because if the quarterbacks come from the pocket, you can have great position on Marvin Harrison. And if the quarterback's comfortable in the pocket, he can throw a dime back shoulder and he just puts his 6'4" arms and goes up and makes a play on you, and there's nothing you can do about it. But if that quarterback tries to do that same play while you got a guy hitting him in the face, then that ball's underthrown, and now all of a sudden Benjamin Morrison or Jaden Mickey or Cam Hart or Christian Gray picks it off. So it's more about up front. That's the big thing for me. It's the Notre Dame D-line. If the Notre Dame D-line is dominant tomorrow for 60 minutes, that will have a bigger impact on any, like if you could say, Brian, you can only pick one unit that's just going to dominate tomorrow. Everybody else will play good, but just one's going to dominate. And you can guarantee that one unit dominates. Who would it be? It's the Notre Dame D-line. It's not even close. There's not a close second. Number 2 is an offensive line, but it's not close. And I truly believe that. That's the greatest kryptonite to Ohio State. And any really great offense is if you can dominate them in the trenches. And Ohio, guess what? Ohio State's going to have the same. If I was covering Ohio State and I was looking at this Notre Dame team scoring 46 points a game, and they got Audric Estime and Benjamin and Sam Hartman and all these guys, what's the one thing you say do? Dominate them up front. Dominate their guards. Dominate their center. Kick Blake Fisher's butt. You know, like I'm having the same game plan. And that's what Notre Dame should do, in my opinion. P. Irish Guy says, outside of Notre Dame's receivers and Ohio State, Notre Dame versus Ohio State receivers, which matchup is most intriguing? Well, I already it's the D-line one. So I'm going to give you another one. And I said this a little bit earlier. It's the Notre Dame receivers against Ohio State DBs. That's it for me. Irish Mills 540 about to hop on a plane to South Bend. First time since 2016. Man, let's go. Brian, what is your take on the good on good in this matchup? Notre Dame O-line versus Ohio State D-line, Ohio State receivers versus NDDBs, etc. I did a whole show on this Wednesday, like a whole section of a show on this on Wednesday. I talked about Notre Dame's run game versus Ohio State's pass game and all that kind of stuff, or run defense, all that kind of stuff. So real quickly, I'll just do this. Notre Dame's O-line versus Ohio State's D-line. That is a good on good matchup, right? Like you said. What is my take on it? I don't really have a take on it other than my concern is Notre Dame's strength is their tackles. Ohio State matches up better inside. That they've got to play well there. If Notre Dame can't play well up the middle, they're going to have a hard time in this game. I don't care how well the tackles play. The other matchup, Ohio State receivers against Notre Dame's DBs. Again, it's important. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to tackle well. You've got to not have blown coverage. Make them earn their yards. Make them work for their yards. But the biggest thing is going to be, it's not the good on goods. Like in the good on, here's the thing about good on good matchups. It's just hold your water. Just hold your water, right? You win some, they win some. Hold your water. The difference is going to be, okay, what can you do in the matchups where maybe you're not as good as them and you can neutralize it. So right now, Ohio State's thinking we have an advantage because we can stop their receivers with our DBs. Well, if the Notre Dame receivers say, no, you can't, that's advantage Notre Dame, because now their strength is no longer a strength. As far as their perceived strength over you, it's no longer strength. You've also then got to thrive in the areas where you should dominate a matchup. So that's why the front seven is so important. The front line is so important. You should have an advantage over the Ohio State offensive line. And if the Ohio State offensive line is able to neutralize that advantage, that's advantage Ohio State now, because you were supposed to dominate that matchup, which helps neutralize the receivers. But now they're working on you. They're working on you in this area. Now you are at a disadvantage, in my opinion. So those are the matchups that I care most about, to be honest with you. Ryan Rush, how did you rank Kyle McCord as a recruit coming out of high school? I had him as a borderline top 100 guy, more like closer to 150, like 125. I liked Kyle McCord coming out. The only reason he was kind of outside the top 100 for me is he's not a real like elite physical tools guy. I just like him. He's smart. He was accurate. I know he had a great receiver in high school because he threw to Marvin Harrison Jr., but I liked him. He was mobile, like and mobile for a pocket passer. Good body, good size. Not great size, but good size. Good enough arm. Willing to throw the ball down the field. Good feel for the game. I liked Kyle McCord a lot coming out. I had him just outside the top 100, and a lot of it just had to do because he didn't have elite physical tools. But I'm very pro Kyle McCord. He's just more of a guy that you need to build around as opposed to a guy that you build on, and that's kind of always been my thing with him. Carlos Garza. Carlos says, if our D starts to look shaky, do you think Coach Freeman steps in or starts to have more input in the game? It would just depend on why. If you don't feel your D coordinator sticking to the plan, then maybe. But look, you hired these guys to do a job. You do the job, and if they don't do the job, then you address it after the game. Because we've seen head coaches jump in and it's like, dude, you're making it worse. You weren't in all these meetings. You don't know the checks. You don't know these type of things. Like, you're not ready to do that. That would be my concern. That'd be my concern. Tristan Paul asks, do you think this USC at home or Clemson away will be our hardest game thus far? Look, man, Tristan, I'm worried about this game, right? Right now, this is going to be Notre Dame's hardest game of the season. Right now. Like, up to this point, this will be the hardest game of the season. Let's see how Notre Dame plays this week. I'm not worried about USC. I'm not worried about Clemson right now. I'm not worried about Duke. I'm not worried about Louisville, Pitt, Wake Forest, Stanford. I'm worried about Ohio State. You got to beat Ohio State first, right? And then we'll worry about the next game. But right now, what's in front of them, Ohio State, is without question their toughest test of the season. Jacob Watson asks, do you think Notre Dame needs to establish the pass before the run to keep Ohio State off the run so much? Look, guys, here's the thing. If they can establish the run, then it doesn't matter if Ohio State's trying to stop their run. If they're trying to stop your run like Clemson did and you're still running, then you don't need to pass us up the run. I think practically speaking, they will likely have to have success throwing the football to protect the run game. I believe that's practically how it's going to play out, but I don't think they have to do that, right? I mean, what they have to do is find a way to run the football, whether that's using the pass game to soften it up, whether that's using some motions to try to get Ohio State like moving to get them to check. Do you do some shifts? Do you do some motions? Do you do some action with your backfield? Do you some reverse smokes? Then maybe you do a reverse. Do you run an early reverse just to kind of get them thinking, saying, hey, you guys can't just tee off on this? Do you do like a read zone early? Do you do some RPO? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to protect your run game. The key is you got to establish a run game. And if Ohio State is going to flat out be fully committed to the run game, then yes, you're going to need to find ways to hurt them, whether it's with a reverse, whether it's with a jet, whether it's with an RPO, whether it's with a bootleg, whether it's with a design pass. I mean, NC State was committed to stopping the run. So what was one of the things that Notre Dame did to break that game open? They ran a play action out of 13 personnel and just threw a little slide route to Holden Stace, and he caught the ball a yard down the field and then ran 39 more yards for a touchdown. If they're going to sell out in that type of situation, sure, do that. But they also got to find a way to run the football. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. Beefeater asks, Brian, if I'm in South Bend during the next 24 hours and an Ohio State fan asks me where to eat, where should I send them to make sure they are not well enough to that's so messed up. Well, where I've had my issues, Beefeater. You're on the board. You know where I've had my issues. But no, I would never, ever say something like that to disparage another local business owner. Sorry, man. I can't help you there. But it's kind of funny. PA Irish guy, is it me or did Ryan Day look not very confident during his presser? It's kind of funny is other people are saying he looked condescending and disrespectful to Notre Dame, and now you're saying he didn't look confident. I think Ryan Day looked like he always looks. And I don't mean that disrespect. I just think he looked like he always looks. I don't think he looked cockier than normal. I didn't think he looked less confident than normal. I just thought he looked like he always looks. Andre Tonsil, the efficiency on offense and be efficient on offense and have a dominant defense within the structure of the play. Thoughts? You nailed it, Andre. I mean, you and I are on the same page, man. You and I are on the same page. You got to be efficient on offense, have a dominant defense, and then make some big plays. But that comes from a lot of times the efficiency. VDub 804, Brian, do you think any of the rookie receivers can make the difference that can help Notre Dame win tomorrow? Sure, they can. Sure, of course. Yeah, they can. Do I think they can? Sure. We've already seen it. I mean, Jaden Greathouse only caught like one ball past the line of scrimmage against NC State. It's a pretty important ball. It's a touchdown that turned a 10-7 game where NC State started to finally get some money. You got to remember this. Like, people say, it was a close game. It was 10-7 at one point. It was 10-7 for less than a minute. I mean, let's think about that. It was 10-7 for less than a minute. Notre Dame went right down the field. It was 10-0 the whole second quarter. You kicked a field goal on your final position of the first quarter. It's bledded in the second quarter. Your first full possession of the second quarter is an 80-yard touchdown run. It was 10-0 the rest of the way. You committed like 4 penalties, which gives NC State the ball, and they score, and your offense scores in less than a minute back to make it 17-7. So, like, it was one of those things where it wasn't as close as people made it out to be. However, if Jaden doesn't make that play, it's not 17-7. Maybe they've got to run a couple other plays and they don't score, and they got to settle for a field goal. So he made a big play, and he made some big plays against Navy. So those kids are more than capable. I mean, Jeremiah Love is capable of making a play. Cooper Flanagan may be on some sort of like trick play where you're in 14 personnel and they're selling out, and you delay and release Cooper Flanagan or something down the field. I mean, I could see something like that. But you trust these kids. That's why you're putting them on the field. And because you're putting them on the field, you've got to be willing to trust them. Say, look, if I'm in 11 personnel and I got Jaden Greathouse in the game, or I'm in 12 or 11 and I got Rico Flores in the game, and that's the read, and that's where I got to throw it to him. Throw it to him with conviction. Otherwise, kids shouldn't be on the field. And the reason they're on the field is because they have made those plays. And when they've gotten their chances, I mean, Rico was getting interfered with almost the entire time on that deep ball early, and he still made the play. It was a great catch, great ball, great catch. And Jaden's, had that one he didn't quite get this past week, but other than that, he's been pretty solid. They're very talented kids, and the staff clearly trusts them. Ryan Rush asks, do you think NC State covers tonight at Virginia? I would assume so. Virginia's not very good. And I think this is a good NC State team. Now, if NC State does not win this game tonight, then I will maybe think twice about how good NC State actually is. But I anticipate them winning this game, and winning this game convincingly, to be honest. I mean, guys, through 3 games, Virginia's being outscored 42-20. They lost to Tennessee 49-13. As we found out, Tennessee's not that good this year. Maryland beat them 42-14, and then they lost at home to James Madison. Virginia stinks. So I fully anticipate NC State going on the road tonight and convincingly beating them. I do. I'll be shocked if they don't, to be honest with you. Andrew Gilmore, have you been following the Brian Ferentz Iowa saga? His contract requires Iowa to average 25 points in order to keep his OC contract at Iowa. I have seen that. We've made some jokes about that, Andrew, and he may have a hard time getting there. I mean, he is a really awful offensive coordinator. He really is. They're at 28.3 right now, and they've played 2 of their 3 worst opponents already in Utah State and Iowa State, and they scored 24 and 20 in those 2 games. 3 of their 3 of their 4 worst opponents, and then they scored 41 against Western Michigan, who is not very good. Western Michigan lost to Syracuse 48-7. Western Michigan stinks. So he may not get there. And I mean, you just watch him. It's just everything is slow. Not just because their players are slow, but it's just slow. It's not creative. He doesn't really play to their strengths. The offensive line's taken a huge step back in recent years under him. He's not a very good coach. And I hate to say that, and I don't mean any disrespect by it, but he's just not a very good coach. There's no evidence that he's a good football coach right now. So I laughed. There was a couple years ago when Notre Dame was trying to hire replace Chip Long. There's actually people in the recruiting world who were trying to push Brian Ferentz as a candidate in Notre Dame. It's ridiculous. Jason Saxon, which team do you feel has more pressure on them? Well, I still think it's Ohio State, to be honest. I mean, Notre Dame's pressure is internal. I think Ohio State has more external pressure for the reasons that we talked about earlier, but, with the expectations. But honestly, We had an Ohio State fan in here the other day, and I think this comment was a little off, but he wasn't off the mark by much. He said this is a lose-lose for Ohio State. If you lose, you lost to a team that people perceive to be inferior, and if you win, you beat a team you're supposed to beat. I don't think it's quite that extreme, but it's not far off. It's definitely that way with the fan base. I have yet to see even Archer, who's a fair guy, has just never thought Notre Dame had a shot to win this game. He's even predicting them to lose by double figures. I mean, I've yet to meet an Ohio State fan that thinks Notre Dame is anywhere close to being on their level. So if they beat Notre Dame, they're going to be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, we're supposed to do that. And if they lose, it's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is awful. Because I doubt that Ohio State fans are going to come to the realization, wow, you know what? They're actually better than I thought. This team's better than I thought. I was wrong about them. The way the Georgia fans and Clemson fans came to the realization to where there's a respect for Notre Dame. Like, we faced you. We beat you in Georgia's case, but man, you guys gave us a test. We thought we were going to blow you out, and it's because you got some good football players over there. There was a level of respect. I remember watching some Notre Dame and Georgia fans in 2019. I sat there and watched this. I couldn't believe it because I love Georgia's press box, by the way. It's low and it's outdoors. So it's great press box. But I'm watching, it was Notre Dame fans, but there's also some Georgia fans that as Notre Dame was leaving the field after the end of the game, were standing cheering for Notre Dame. It was kind of like, like they were like, wow, this team earned our respect. This team came and fought, and they battled, and they gave our boys everything they can handle, and there was a level of respect for that. I think 90% of Ohio State fans, if Notre Dame wins, will not have I was wrong about Notre Dame mentality. It'll be, what's wrong with Ohio State? That'll be their reaction. So in that regard, I think there's merit to the fact that Ohio State is in some ways a bit of a lose-lose situation when it comes to their fan base and a portion of the media. Because like the Feinbaums and the people like that are going to look at this the same way they're how do you lose to Notre Dame? Because he's a clown and he'll look for any chance to tear down Ohio State and other programs he views as threats to the SEC. And he does not view Notre Dame as a threat to the SEC. So, but with rational analysts and rational fans and coaches, if Ohio State plays well and Notre Dame just plays better, they're going to say, you know what, you lost to a really good football team. Now go make some changes and adjustments and you'll be okay and go handle your business. But amongst the fan base and a certain part of the clickbait-driven national media, Ohio State has a lot more pressure because they're supposed to go into Notre Dame Stadium and win. And that's why I would say my answer would be Ohio State. Some of you may disagree. I'd be curious what you guys think about that because that's my take. I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys agree with me? Do you think it's Ohio State that has more pressure on them? I think they do. I'd be curious what you guys think. All right, next question. 99 problems. BKA1. Since Stanford's mascot is a tree and Ohio State's mascot is a tree nut, does that make Stanford their daddy? Just thinking of creative ways to put the tree nuts in their proper place. Here's how you put them in their proper place. 99 problems. But BK ain't one. Still love that. At the end of the game, you look up the scoreboard. Notre Dame's point total is higher than Ohio State's point total. That's the one and only way to put the Buckeyes in their place because you can come up with all the creative insults that you want, and that's a funny one, by the way. Stanford's your daddy. You can do all that stuff, but at the end of the game, they have more points than your team has. Doesn't matter. They're just fun insults, but I'll gladly take all the insults in the world if the team I follow has more points than the team that they follow at the end of the day. And that's all really Ohio State fans think about. Pythagorean says, as a coach, you may know more about the logistical time and effort constraints, but can you calm my fears that Lorenzo won't bite Notre Dame like he is their Brent Venables, knowing the offense and the defense? Again, this is a different team. They'll have different signals. Your game plan changes from week to week. Your calls change from week to week. Is he going to try to help them? I'm sure. Most coaches don't really tap into that too much because they understand your knowledge, even though you were there in the spring, it's going to be somewhat limited because of how things evolve and change as you go through different periods. And Notre Dame will have some things where they'll have some checks and some calls that are different. The other thing too is Notre Dame huddles a lot more now than they did in the past. So they're not just making quite as many deep calls from the sideline. There's more stuff that's happening on the fly that you really can't quickly get a reaction to. So I'd be more worried about James Laurinaitis than I would be Lorenzo Styles as far as knowing things. Much more concerned about that. Coach Koch has a question based on performance up to this point. Who can get drafted this year and where do they go? Oh man, uh based on performance so far, here's guys that I would assume would get drafted in the 24 draft. Sam Hartman, Audric Estime, Blake Fisher. Joe Alt, Riley Mills, Javante Jean-Baptiste, most likely. Cam Hart. I'm hoping Maris does not because I'm hoping he comes back, but maybe JD Bertrand. Maybe that's who I would say would probably. Now again, I'm hoping that Chris Tyree comes back. I'm hoping that Blake Fisher comes back. So I'm projecting some of those guys to come back. I'm hoping Jordan Patelho comes back. That's why I don't have him on the list. So there's some Xavier Watts I don't have on the list because I want him to come back. So those are guys that I'm pretty sure are going to be gone after this year. Some of them definitely will be. I mean, Javante will definitely be. Sam will definitely be. And I know I don't want Audric to go pro. I do. I want Audric Estime to go pro because if Audric Estime goes pro, it means he continues what he's doing now for the whole year. That's great for the team. And then he gets his chance to fulfill a dream. That's a win-win for me. And the way that Notre Dame was recruited, they'll be okay. But if Audric goes pro, it's because he played extremely well for an entire season. He stayed healthy. That's great. Coach Koch also asked, in your opinion, is Deuce better option than Bear is? Look, I've said this. I wrote an article about this last week before the commitment when Bear was visiting. Notre Dame, to me, was in a win-win situation with Deuce and Bear. I like Bear Bachmeier as a quarterback. He reminds me a lot of pre-changing your throwing motion, Tyler Buckner. Not as dynamic as a runner, a little bit better arm as a thrower, but very similar body type, very similar style of play, very similar quarterback. And I'd have been totally fine if Bear Bachmeier would have been your quarterback. But I also always said that Deuce is the guy that I had at the top of my board because he has the highest ceiling. And Ryan and I talked about this over the summer. And the comment I made was the reason I love Deuce so much is because Deuce is the perfect quarterback to get the year after CJ Carr. CJ is a super high floor. Deuce is going to need more time, but he's got a super high ceiling. And so I think I think Deuce will understand the need to be patient and to continue to develop his game, which makes him great to have behind CJ. Because hopefully CJ comes in, he's playing early, and if it's the two of them, this isn't meant to disparage Kenny Minchie. It's just to make a point about if they're the next two quarterbacks, CJ comes in, he's playing early, and Deuce comes in and he redshirts and takes his time to develop and that kind of thing. That would be an ideal situation. But yes, I love Deuce Knight as a quarterback, and he's got all the talent in the world. You've got a quarterback coach in Gino Gaduli that if he can stay for a few years has developed a kid that's similarly raw in Desmond Ridder. And I would argue that Deuce has better physical tools than Desmond Ridder had coming out of high school by a lot. Deuce is at the top of my board. I mean, that was it. The only guy that I would have said, hey, if I could have any quarterback over Deuce, I mean, Bryce Underwood, just because he's the best quarterback in the country. But there's not a lot of guys I would take over Deuce because of the fact you have Kenny and CJ. You don't need a high floor guy. I don't need that kind of guy. And I don't need George McIntyre, who I like a lot. I like George McIntyre a ton. And if he wanted to come to Notre Dame, I'd be totally fine with that. But he's kind of like Kenny and CJ. He's kind of the same guy. He's taller, but he's the same guy. Deuce brings you something different to the table. And I like that complementary skill set. Now, he can be a pocket passer and throw for a bunch of yards and all that eventually, but he'll never, as long as he's healthy, he'll never lose that ability to also be a dynamic runner. And that's something that I like a lot. Jeff Fluke says, what team does Desmond Howard pick, Notre Dame or Ohio State? If I had to bet, I would bet that he's going to pick Notre Dame. From what I'm told, I haven't watched, but from what I'm told, and you guys in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from what I've been told, Desmond's been kind of high on Notre Dame this year. I believe he picked Notre Dame to beat NC State. Kirk Herbstreit predict Notre Dame to lose to NC State. So I would imagine so. Yeah. I would imagine so. But he'll pick Notre Dame to win that game. All right, let's see here. All right. Let's go to Zibby94. Was listening to an Ohio State podcast, mistake, where they were laughing that we had Javante Jean-Baptiste, and I don't understand why. I've been pleased with this play so far. It's because the people that would be laughing about that are clowns and just lack decency and respect. I mean, Javante Jean-Baptiste was a good rotation player for Ohio State last couple of years. He was. But to them, he sucked and he was terrible and he went to Notre Dame. He couldn't play here, blah, 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 blah. They're clowns. I mean, some of the stuff I've listened to, it's like, are these like emotional children that I'm listening to? Like some of the way they talk, like it honestly, with some of the podcasts that I saw last year and this year that people have sent me, it's like if three drunk guys at a bar who are Ohio State fans decided to do a show. That's what it would look like, and that's what it would sound like. It really is. It's childish. Some of them are good. Some of them are good, but some of them are just like, why am I wasting my time listening to this? I don't understand why. But Javante Jean-Baptiste is done well for Notre Dame. Now, again, he's done well against Navy and Central Michigan and Tennessee State and NC State. Can he do well in a game like this? We'll find out. Because nobody's going to care at the end of the year if Javante Jean-Baptiste looked great against Central Michigan and NC State. They're going to care that against Ohio State he did nothing, or against Ohio State he did well, and that's going to be the key. That's what he's going to be judged on. John Lacey, Vince Vaughn, rule number 76: no excuses, play like a champion. As you all know, the longtime listeners, we have certainly used that quote on this show. Great movie, by the way, great movie, and one of my favorite quotes ever. And his facial expression in that exchange is also tremendous. Absolutely. And for those who know the topic, it was just a fun scene all around. WJS, how hard will it be for you not to celebrate in any way in the press box if Notre Dame is dominant tomorrow? It'll be easy to not celebrate. Now, we have a way of showing emotion in games that is not visible and doesn't violate policies, but no, I don't think it'd be hard. I mean, I watched them do that to Clemson last year, and it was enjoyable. But you do it for so long, and you just kind of your entire emotional state is different than it is when you're maybe watching it at home or from the stands. David Prevo asks, from a play calling standpoint perspective, what do you hope to see on the first drive for Notre Dame? I think it's very important to have a strong start at home. Look, balance, right, David? And what I mean by that is, good run pass mix, mix up your formations and move them around. I want to see them come out and establish an early rhythm is what I'd like to see. I mean, look, if you get to the end zone, I don't really care how. I mean, if you go for 75 on your first play of the scrimmage, okay, great. I'm like, oh, man, why didn't you guys go on a longer drive? Why'd you only score on one play? I won't say that. But if short of that, what I would like to see is just a series where you're just establishing yourself, right? You're moving the chains, you're running the ball, even if it's only like 4, 5, 6, 7 yards a pop. You don't have to necessarily rip a big one off. You get to 3rd and 5, you convert it on 3rd down, you get the first down, and maybe hit a 13, 14-yard pass play, get into the red zone, punch it in the end zone. Like, that's what I want to see first drive. You showed them your 11, you showed them your 12, you showed them your 13, you ran the ball inside, you ran the ball outside. You got some shots down the field, even if you don't hit them, as long as you come back and move the chains, let them know that this isn't going to be a dink and dunk game. That's kind of what I want to see in the first couple series, really, David, is just keep them off balance. Hey, you guys got a lot you're going to have to prepare for today. Keep them off balance, because eventually if you put them in a situation where they got to start kind of guessing what's coming, they're going to guess wrong. And that's where you hit a big, that's what happened against NC State. They were able to catch them in a couple calls that opened up big play opportunities, and they took advantage of it. You've got to do the same thing against Ohio State. Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker. What is the one thing each coordinator has done this season that you want them to continue to do against Ohio State? And one thing to stop against Ohio State? Thank you for this great coverage. Love, IB. Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much. One thing I want to see from the offensive coordinator is continue the run game diversity. I love what Jared Parker's done so far run game wise. It's been different every week, and he's shown a level of patience with it that I respect and appreciate, and I would like to see that continue in this game. even if early on it's maybe not going great. Like NC State, they could have easily abandoned the run against NC State, and they didn't. And Audric Estime went from 3 carries for 1 yard total to 4 carries for 81 yards because they kept at it, kept at it, they kept at it. Defensively, what's the one thing that they've done so far that I would like to see them continue? It would be, because they haven't always done this consistently, but I think they've done a pretty good job of mixing up their looks. I think they've done a pretty good job of that. They don't just line up and give away things. They line up. They do come and show pressure and then drop. They do bring. They've been more effective bringing second level pressures this season from depth. Prior to the Central Michigan game, anyway, they were better at that. So I'd like to see that continue. One thing I'd like them to stop doing. I want to mix things up offensively, but I would not do quite as much in series subbing. So I would like to see them. Okay, you come out in 12. Give me 4 or 5 different looks out of 12 before you sub out, unless you get into like a third down or you get sacked and it's 2nd and 15 and you got to put your 11 personnel in. I would say, come out in 11 and then just show them a couple looks, show them some different looks. And as opposed to just every snap, you're rotating somebody in and out. I just think that can make it a little bit harder to get into a really good rhythm. That would be something that I would want to see a little bit different on offense. And then defensively, stop blitzing just because. Don't just blitz just because. Have some more method to your madness. And that was true against NC State and Navy and even Tennessee State to a degree. It was not true against Central Michigan. But, up until the Central Michigan game, I was relatively pleased with what I'd seen from Al Golden. That game was kind of gave me some 2021 flashbacks that I didn't overly enjoy. "99 problems, but BK ain't one." If Notre Dame's offensive game plan for the Ohio State game were a boxer, which boxer would you like it to be? Same question for the defense. If it's me, it's Mike Tyson for both. Violent and aggressive. All right, if okay, you're this is an interesting one. If you're talking about, I'll go defense first because the one for defense just popped into my head. For defense, it's Evander Holyfield because you're going against a heavyweight offense. Evander was always a bit of an undersized heavyweight. And he was a really good defensive boxer. He could take blows, but he was a smart boxer. He was a patient boxer. He would wait for his time. He could get those jabs in to really sting you. Like you think you got him, and then boom, he just hits you right in the jaw, pops you right in the nose. Really undersized guy, but quick and on the move, and he could move pretty well. And he had the heart of a warrior, man. And he really did. And that's if the defense plays on Saturday like Evander Holyfield fought during his prime, they're going to be really good. And they're going to take some blows early, and you're going to win a couple rounds. But the deeper you get into the game, the less chance you have to win because that heart and that speed, when your legs are when you're 30 pounds bigger than Evander and your legs are getting heavy and he's still fresh and moving, all of a sudden he starts sticking some of those blows that weren't getting there early. That's what I would like to see from him. Offensively, that's a good one because it wouldn't be Mike Tyson because here's the deal. I get what you're saying. But it wouldn't be Mike Tyson. Somebody in the chat already said it. And I'll go with that. The reason it's not Mike Tyson because you can't knock a team out in the first quarter because you've got to play 4 quarters. So I don't want the guy that is that. I want the guy that is constantly on the attack and speed and mixing it up. And I'm hitting you from the right. I'm hitting you from the left. I'm moving around. I'm keeping you off balance. And somebody said in the chat, I think it's Roy Jones Jr. I think it's a great call. It would be Roy Jones Jr. That would be it for me. And if you leave your chin exposed, I'm gonna knock you out. When Roy was another one that you got deeper into fights, his stamina and conditioning was tremendous when he was in his prime. So if you didn't get to him early, you had no chance because he was definitely going to beat you later in fights, is how I always felt when I saw him fight. So that'd be a good one for me. I got an interesting question here. Pablo Cruz says, "Hey Brian, going to Norfolk, Virginia this weekend with the family. What's the go-to restaurant in this area?" So I'm a little biased because it's a restaurant that I don't get to have a lot. So I haven't lived in Norfolk in over well over 15 years. So I couldn't tell you like a lot of the restaurants around and stuff like that. But here's where I go every time I'm home. And I was there last week when I was visiting. I'm going to be there next week when I'm in town because I'm going to be in Virginia before the Duke game. It's Captain George's, which is down on Laskin Road. You don't get that kind of seafood around here. It's an all-you-can-eat seafood buffet. I love it. I'm not a real experimental guy. I get the same thing every time. First plate has crab leg shrimp. It has stuffed mushrooms and it has corn on the cob. And then after that, it's nothing but shrimp and crab legs rest of the way until I get to dessert. And then they have a really good banana pudding and a really good cherry cheesecake. That I usually get one of those two things as well. But that's a go-to for me every time. And now they've got this new addition onto it that's been built in the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years. It's called Just George's. It's like same place, but it's like a sports bar type of thing. So they have like games and all that stuff on. So if you go at night on Thursday or Friday night and there's a game on, you'll be able to watch a game. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, Captain George's is the place I always go to whenever I'm in town. I was there last week, or 2 weeks ago now, before the NC State game, and I'll be there again next week. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Absolutely. Other than that, I couldn't tell you. I haven't lived there in a long time. So there might be some other, if there's some other folks from Norfolk that have been in the town, they can kind of tell you maybe some other types of restaurants there. But for me, that's the only place I concern myself trying to get to. And the other thing I do when I'm there, and this may not be, I get Wawa subs like for lunch. I love Wawa subs. I've been eating those since I was in college. And that's it, man. That's the only other thing that I have to do, but that's not really a restaurant. And lots of people have Wawas. So that would be mine. 99 props became one. If Notre Dame's offensive game plan for the Ohio State game. Oh, actually, I just answered that one. That was the boxing question, which is a really good one. Jason Rose, hey, Brian, take out the coaching aspect of it. How do you feel about the future of the defense from a talent perspective? The talent is in the pipeline. It's getting a lot closer. It's not there yet. It's not there yet as far as, having the kind of defense like Ohio State had in 15 and 14 and having the kind of defense like Clemson had in their prime in like 18, to where you're just like, dude, you have like NFL guys everywhere. You got NFL guys at corner, NFL guys at safety, NFL guys at linebacker, NFL guys on the D line. They're not there yet. They're getting closer. But, like the talent at linebacker, there's a big gap between your fifth years and then your next group of guys are freshmen and sophomores. So there's like a gap in between. Interior of the D line still has to get better and more consistently better. The edge rush, like your incoming freshman class, is pretty good. They got some good edge rushers in the 24 class with Cole Mullins and Logan Thomas and Bryce Young, but the consistency's not there from the D line. They're still getting like the high ceiling, low floor guys. It'd be nice to get guys that have high floors and high ceilings every now and then. Like linebacker recruiting is the close, and cornerback recruiting is the closest thing to like, yep, it's arrived. Because when you look at the 22 class, I love the Josh Burnham, Jalen Sneed, Junior Tuilamoka, Nolan Ziegler class. By the way, for those who don't know, Nolan was on the sideline on Saturday against Central Michigan. So that's great. So his progress has come along. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But it's been very encouraging news last couple of weeks. So as long as it stays on track, I fully expect him to be back in pads and practicing and all that here very soon. But he was with the team on the sideline on Saturday, was there during warmups, not going through warmups, but there with the coaches. So that was awesome. It was really cool to see that. It was really, really important for me and for him and his family to see that. So that was good. But, you were so good there. Josh Burnham's now moved over to Viper. Junior Chalamakis helped. And then you replace that with another great linebacker class and Greg Bowen and Jaden Alsbury and Preston Zinner. You've got another really great linebacker class coming in with Kingston Viliama Asa and Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak. So linebacker recruiting is it's there. It's now it's just develop it, right? Cornerback recruiting is there. I mean, Benjamin Morris and Jaden Mickey. You follow that up with Micah Bell and Christian Gray. You follow that up with Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. Now, I'm not as high on Carson Hobbs as the Notre Dame staff is. They love that kid. I got to see it. But Leonard Moore's a dude. And then you look at some of the corners they're bringing in from 24 in the 25 class. I mean, Devin Williams loves Notre Dame so far. He's not a done deal by any stretch. And I wouldn't even necessarily call him their leader right now, but they're in the game. They're in the game with Mark Zachary. They're in the game with Dallas Golden, with Dorian Brew. So, I mean, that position's there. Safety's got to get better. Getting Bronte Johnson was huge. I like Kennedy Urlacher. I haven't watched Tabron Benny Powell senior film yet, but I've heard he's looked a lot better. I can't say that firsthand because I haven't watched it yet. You've got to have a great safety class in 25. That's so important because now I like the Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick class. Adon in limited snaps has looked pretty good. He really has. I've liked what I've seen from Adon Schuler so far in limited time. He could end up even being better than I thought from what I've seen so far. Again, very, very limited snaps, but just athletically, he looks better than I thought he was going to be. Safety's a work in progress. D tackle, definitely a work in progress. D end is too inconsistent. So those positions are there's a lot of talent there, but they're too much in the once these guys leave, there's a big question mark. Like let's say Howard Cross and Riley Mills both go pro after this year. And you've got Onye and Rubio, but after that, it's like Donovan Heinisch and what? You know what I mean? Like you lose Nana and Javante Jean-Baptiste after this year. Who's your big ends next year? It's hopefully Tyson Ford and maybe Boubacar moves over there. Maybe Brennan Vernon. Like, do we really know who that's going to be? We don't, and that's a problem. But they're a lot further along now than they were 3 years ago because they're recruiting so much better and consistently at corner and linebacker, and they are getting really good raw talent on the D line. Like they're not bringing in like the Jonathan McCollisters anymore and guys like that. They're not having to take chances on banged up, injured guys with a lot of ability. Like I loved Hunter Spears coming out of high school, but he was a risk because he had the knee injuries, and you weren't sure if he was going to be that same guy, and he ended up having some more injuries and all that. But like you're taking a risk on a guy like that, and that's still okay from time to time, but you can't just keep doing it. And so it's better, but it's not there yet. The 25 class is going to really tell us a lot about where they are. The Sun Chance kid, Brian, we are taking my mom tomorrow late morning, about 45 minutes out of town to celebrate her birthday. Any suggestions to get the family back before kickoff? They can spend hours at a mall. To say tomorrow late morning, 45 minutes out of town to celebrate her birthday, what I would say is like find something find some ladies only event. Like play, hey, you know what? Like, why don't you ladies go do this thing? Like take them to a spa, take them to some sort of thing like that where like the ladies go to sort of like the ladies thing. So, and you got to beg your wife to, if you have a wife or a girlfriend or sister or whatever, like, hey, can you take one for the team and take mom to the spa? And then while they're doing that, you guys find a nice sports bar and watch the game. That's what I would suggest that you do if you're still out of town, but that's pretty funny. All right, next question is Chris S. What's the consensus on Rudolph as a coach, as an O-line coach? I don't know that there's a consensus on him, and we really aren't going to know who he is until after this game. Ask me this next week. I'll have a much better answer for you. Brian Lalaberte, it seems like over the first few games, Estime started slow, and as the defense wears down, he takes over. Do you see the offense utilizing Price and Love more in the first half to keep Audric fresh? That's what they've done so far, Brian. I mean, we saw that against Central Michigan. Audric didn't carry the ball once in the second quarter. He got several carries. I actually thought Audric started pretty well against Central Michigan. That's a game where I'll somewhat disagree with you a little bit on that one. I think overall Audric's always been a little bit of a slow starter. That's just because the line, usually needs a little bit time to go. But I actually thought last week that Audric started pretty well against Central Michigan. I mean, first carry of the game, he goes for 8 yards. Next carry, he goes for 3, which moved the chains. Then he goes for 5 yards and gets that. Second series of the game, he got 1 yard on the second down. They converted to 3rd and 9. He didn't get another carry again until you got to a 1st and 10 at the 37 going in. He gets a first down. You go pass, quarterback or inside zone to Jeremiah Love for 8. You get into 3rd and 2. You give to Audric. He gets stopped. 4th and 1. He goes for 17-yard touchdown. So I actually thought Audric came out and played pretty well. The next time he gets the football is the 3rd quarter, and then he obviously goes off. But I actually thought Audric started pretty well in this game. NC State game, he didn't start incredibly well. Obviously went 3 carries for 1 yard. First carry of the game against Tennessee State, he went for 9 yards. But again, he kind of took over as the game got on. I think sometimes with those big kind of backs, they just need a little bit of they just got to get rolling. I mean, first drive of the game against Navy, two of his first 3 carries went for 10 plus yards, and then he ends the drive with a 7-yard gain to get down to the goal line, and he punches in on the next drive. His first carry of the second drive went for 13 yards, and he fumbled, and then they took him out. So I think Aldrich's started a little bit better this year than he has in the past. I think the NC State game wasn't a good start, but that's because the offensive line was getting their butt kicked and they were overloading Notre Dame with numbers. So I think last year Aldrich was definitely not his fast starter, and that's why they didn't play him a ton. But I do think the staff has done a pretty good job of mixing in their running back rotation a lot more early, and then second half Aldrich's a little bit more fresh and he can put a team away. So I think in that regard, Brian, I agree with your observation and very a lot, and think the staff will continue to utilize those guys to keep them fresh. Joe Allen says, when you tailgate, what adult beverage is your go-to? I assume by adult beverage you mean alcohol. I don't drink alcohol. I've never had a beer. I mean, I've had like alcoholic drinks before my life, but not much. I'm not really an alcohol drinker. So, I mean, at tailgates, I'm water, Mountain Dew, Gatorade. That's my tailgate beverage. Now, we might have some Twisted Tea tomorrow at the tailgate because Twisted Tea sent us a bunch of stuff because they're sponsoring our CFB Nation. They're sponsoring our channel for the football season. Twisted Tea is our official sponsor of the CFB Nation channel during the season. So they sent us a bunch. So we may bring that tomorrow. I still gotta decide whether or not I'm comfortable with that or not. But so my answer would be my adult beverage at a tailgate is either Mountain Dew or Gatorade would be my choice, or water if I'm trying to not have a lot of sugar. Tomorrow it'll be Mountain Dew. Sorry, folks, it will be. Carmel Humphrey, sorry. With as good as our DBs are, having them 5-6 yards off receivers in the first 4 games seems odd, and it kind of reminds me of old DC strategy that got us killed. Any reason to keep doing this? I haven't felt that way. They always have like the field corner's always been off under Al Golden last year. Benjamin Morrison's always mixed it up. There's been a lot of press. I haven't noticed that Benjamin's been off more this year than last year. The field corner's always been off more. And look, my man, listen, look, there's a lot of things that I can complain about with Al Golden. A lot of things. Just because he and I, and the reason why, because he and I philosophically, like what he likes to do on defense isn't necessarily like my cup of tea. The defense the first 3 games was pretty good, right? Pretty darn good. But when it comes to how they're using their corners, in 4 games, Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart have combined to give up 7 completions. If you add Jaden Mickey into the conversation, they've combined to give up 8 completions, and then you'd have to go to their number 4 corner to get to 10 completions on the season. In 4 games, the top 2 deep at cornerback has allowed 10 completions on, let me do the math here, that's 21, and Jaden's 3, so that's 24. Christian Gray's 3, that's 27. Teams are 10 of 27 in 4 games against Notre Dame's corners. It's 37%. That's pretty good. One of Ohio State's starting cornerbacks, Davidson Inbignosa, and I hope I'm saying that right, has given up 12 completions this year. Ohio State's starting 2 corners and their nickel corner in 3 games, and everybody keeps saying how good their corners are, and they have played well. But their top 3 corners have given up 23 completions on 46 attempts, according to Pro Football Focus. So 50% completion rate so far this year. They've had 1 touchdown allowed, 1 interception allowed, 4 pass breakups. And so, I mean, I have a hard time criticizing what Al Golden has done with the corners so far this year. I mean, there's a lot of things we could say, hey, man, don't do this. But how he's playing his corners, I can't be with you there. I can't be with you there. How they're playing their corners so far has worked really well. Now, will it work tomorrow? Find out. But so far, man, I mean, they've been pretty good so far. Spark 5219. If our guards are not holding up under Ohio State pressure, do we give Billy and Andrew a shot? They've shown no inkling that they're going to do anything at guard other than play those two guys. So I'll say this: I don't know the answer. I hope we don't find out tomorrow. That's just what I'll say. Hope we don't find out. I think we can all agree on that. Tyler Evans with Super Chat. Thank you, Tyler, very much. What would you examine? What would you examine? What would your, I don't know, excitement level be if Benjamin Morrison or Cam Hart does a pick six early in the game? I'll be super fired up. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can break a game like this open. I mean, I think of like the Michigan State game in 2015. You guys remember, or 2017? You guys remember that game? That ended up being a really good Michigan State team, except when they played Ohio State. But that was a pretty good Michigan State team that year. They weren't ranked at the time, but they ended up winning 10 games that year. Pretty good football team, really good rush defense that year. But Notre Dame comes out that game, and they go. I believe Notre Dame started with the ball. I'm gonna pull it up, but real quick. So just Notre Dame, I believe, starts with the ball, and they go down and they score. If you remember, Brandon hit a deep ball to Equinemius. He scored on a quarterback draw on that drive, went right down the field and scored on Michigan State. And then Michigan State gets the ball back, and they go down and get to near midfield, and Brian Lewerke throws a pick six to Julian Love. And they were playing from behind the eight ball the rest of the game. Now, they end up scoring their next drive to make it 14-7, but like they just could never quite get back into that game. And next thing you know, at halftime, and it also helped, Sean Crawford, who we talked about earlier, made a phenomenal play, knocking the ball out of the hands of their running back in that game. If you guys remember, LJ Scott was about to score and he knocks it out. They recover it, go down and score. So it was 21-7. It was about to be 21-14. Notre Dame gets the ball back, goes down the field, scores a touchdown, 28-7, game's over. It's a pretty good Michigan State team. That kind of pick six, those kind of big plays defensively that either take points off the board for them or add points to you are huge. I think that same season, here's another one. Notre Dame's playing NC State that year in 2017. Pretty close game, pretty hard-fought game, and Julian Love has a pick six in that game that was just sort of a backbreaker. I mean, those type of plays can really have a big impact on a team. It was 21-14, third quarter, NC State's trying to score to get back in the game, and pick six, and all of a sudden it's 28-14, and it was never the same. So, yeah, anytime you can make a play like that, especially if you can do it early, can be a huge momentum swing. I mean, think of the energy that erupted out of that Notre Dame stadium last year when they blocked that punt against Clemson. Same kind of energy. A pick six to me is a scoop and score on a fumble is going to give you the same energy as a blocked punt for a touchdown, a blocked field goal that you return back for a touchdown. It is a huge emotional swing, and it can really energize a crowd. So, man, I would be excited, fired up, and it would just – because if you can get cheap points against Ohio State, that's a great way to help you win football games. I mean, if you can score 30-something points without having to have 5 different scoring drives where you've got to go 75, 80-plus yards, and you can get short fields or your defense can give you points. I mean, think about this. We talk about how Notre Dame smashed Clemson last year, right? Like, man, they just blew Clemson out. They scored 21 offensive points, and 7 of those offensive points came on like a 12-yard drive because of the defense. They didn't blow Clemson out last year because their offense played great. They blew Clemson out last year because their defense and special teams both got them points, and the defense got them 3 scores. I mean, the defense got them 2 scores, so they had 3 non-offensive scores. If you credit the defense for giving them the ball at the 11 or 12-yard line going in, if you remember that first interception. So, I mean, Notre Dame beat Clemson last year by 3 touchdowns in a game where they only had 348 yards of offense. That's it. They passed for 85 yards. So those things can be huge, huge momentum changers, man. Huge. Raymond Harton asks, Super Chat, thank you, Raymond. Who is our best blocking running back? Oh, man. I'd probably say Audric for the most part. Devin Ford's been pretty good in limited snaps. That probably my top 2. Troy McIntosh asks, thank you for Super Chat, Troy. Will we see Notre Dame use the slow mesh? I would hope not. That's not who Notre Dame is. Now, would I like to see some play actions where, maybe you come out of that and hit something quick if you think you can catch them in a blitz? Yeah, sure. But no, I'm not a big fan of the slow mesh. Look, guys, there's a reason that Sam Hartman through 10, like 12, 13 plus interceptions the last 2 years, because the slow mesh is going to it's going to create openings. And it's also going to get you into trouble at times. And you could give maybe 4 or 5 interceptions in the last 2 years each year to it being a direct result of because you're running the slow mesh. Yeah, it works great for Clemson, but it's just not who Notre Dame is. So I hope we don't see it. Look, this is the first time, Troy, and here's partly why I'm answering the question that way, Troy. This is what I'm explaining. For me, this is the first time that I feel Notre Dame has the team where they don't have to pull out the bag of tricks. And what I mean bag of tricks is like I'm okay doing a reverse. If you're going to over pursue and fly to the ball when we run toss, I'm going to hurt you with it. So I don't view like a reverse because I saw something or like as a bag of tricks. What I mean is you're going away from who you are because you don't think you're good enough to just beat them on your own. This is the first time in a long time Notre Dame's played against this caliber team where I've actually felt that's not the case. Play your game. Be who you are. Now, are there some things we're going to see against Ohio State on Saturday that we haven't seen all year? I expect that. Both sides of the ball. I expect Ohio State to show some stuff they haven't shown this year. But that's a little different than like changing your entire backfield philosophy and doing all that stuff. And I also don't want to get those habits back into to Sam Hartman, to be honest with you. I don't necessarily want to go there. Super chat from Gregory Perez with coaches in this. Thank you, Gregory, very, very much for this one and the next one. With coaches and assistants in all CFB have outright impressed you. Which coaches and assistants in all of college football have outright impressed you so far this year? For me, it is Dino Babers, even though I feel like he will eventually let me down with what was starting to look bad. Gregory also says in a related question, do you feel like there are multiple avenues for Notre Dame to win? And is that due to Notre Dame's ascension or an Ohio State regression? It's about a Notre Dame's ascension. Look, yeah, Ohio State's not going to be as good with a backup quarterback, or not a backup quarterback, a first-year quarterback as they were with C.J. Stroud after the whole year under his belt. And Kyle McCord's not as good as C.J. Stroud was, but they are very, very talented. This is a very good football team. And if Notre Dame wins, they'll have to earn it. But as I was saying to Troy, this is the first time I feel like Notre Dame doesn't have to play the perfect game to win. They just got to play their game, which means, look, if you're able to burn them with the pass game, burn them with the pass game. If you can hurt them with the run game, hurt them with the run game. There's different ways that they can win a game like this, which is really important. And to me, that's what I want to see, man. I want to see them do that. I don't want to see them have to, man, you catch a million breaks and you still only win by a field goal because you're just not as good as them. You just kind of got lucky that day, right? Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see them just look, we're the better team. We're the better team right now. And that's what I want to see. To your first super chat, look, staffs that have impressed me so far. Coach Babers is obviously one. The job he's done at Syracuse this year is excellent. They're off to a great start. They're 3-0. They blew out Colgate. They blew out Western Michigan, teams you're supposed to beat. They had a really nice road win over Purdue. Purdue, we'll see how good Purdue is. They play Army this weekend. He's got to win that game to keep it going. The problem with Coach Babers has been not so much that they can't get off to good starts, it's that they can't keep those starts going. Last year, Syracuse started 6-0, similar to this year. Blew out Louisville in the opener, blew out UConn, had a really nice win over Purdue, beat Virginia, blew out Wagner, beat NC State, who was ranked 15th in the nation at the time, 24-9. Then they lost a hard-fought game to Clemson, and they got blown out by Notre Dame, and then they imploded. They ended up going, 7-5 in the regular season, lose a bowl game to Minnesota, and they go 7-6. So they went 1-6 in the last 7 games. And we've seen that from Coach Babers' teams. I mean, 2 years ago, they start off 3-1, lose to Rutgers, and then they implode. So you start off 3-1, you go 2-6 the rest of the way. Those are the things that have really hurt him in past years is just, you see these good starts, 2018, you start off pretty good, you're 4-0, then you lose back-to-back games, kind of climb back pretty well, and then you end the season getting blown out by Notre Dame, right, and late in the year. So it's been the finish with Coach Babers. That's been the issue. But so far, love what I'm seeing from him. In the ACC, like, hey, what's kind of funny is everybody talks about North Carolina and Drake May and all that kind of stuff. But look, right now, North Carolina's defense is doing pretty well. And somebody said to me, like, well, what about the App State game? And I was like, well, they gave up 27 points in regulation. It wasn't great. But if you watch the game, they did some pretty good things in that game as well, right? But that was sort of the anomaly. They did a great job shutting down South Carolina's offense. They did a great job shutting down Minnesota's offense. They're not a great defense by any stretch, but they've gotten better. Hats off to Coach Chiswick for making them better. I mean, they've already held two opponents so far this season. North Carolina has to under 20 points. If you go back and look at 2020, their team last year, they held one opponent the entire year to under 21 points, and that didn't happen until game 5. They gave up 24 points to a Florida A&M team that had like 20 dudes not eligible for that game. They still gave up 24 points. They gave up 28 points to Georgia State, 61 to Appalachian State. So, yeah, they've done a really nice job at North Carolina defensively. I think they've done a really nice job so far. Some other coaching staffs that have done a good job so far. I mean, Miami's having a nice bounce back year. Coach Elko's doing a great job at Duke so far. Really like the job he's doing there. Lance Leopold is just really building a nice little program at Kansas. I mean, really nice little program at Kansas. Like what he's doing. I thought Coach Sark did a great job getting that team ready to go play down at Alabama. Thought he did just an excellent job there. Like what they're doing so far. Greg Schiano and Rutgers off to a very good start. They've coached well. I like some things that they're doing so far this season. So hats off to what the Rutgers staff is doing so far. Florida, look, I was the only guy. I think I was the only guy. No. Andrew McDonough also picked Florida last week. And Andrew McDonough in our college football picks is, by the way, is undefeated so far. So, and he has Notre Dame winning by double digits tomorrow. So just a heads up to y'all. But he and I both predicted Florida to beat Tennessee last week, because the thing I said is, like, guys, you go back and watch that game. Florida outgained Utah by 76 yards. They lost that, and Utah got what, like a quarter of that on one play, the first play of the game. They had 70 yards on the first play of the game, and they only had 200 the rest of the way. And part of it's because they called the dogs off a little bit. But Florida moved the ball on Utah. They just kept shooting themselves in the foot with turnovers and stupid penalties and just taking sacks when they shouldn't have taken sacks and things like that. But Florida bounced back and they looked good. I mean, FCS McNeese, they're not very good, but Florida looked good in that game, I thought. And then they come out and they smack Tennessee. So, Billy Napier's team could have collapsed and folded, but they didn't. And they battled. So hats off to him. They got Charlotte this week, and then Kentucky, Vanderbilt. They've got to beat Kentucky on the road. If they can beat Kentucky on the road, then all of a sudden they're heading to a game against South Carolina in October, 6-1, and they're going to be ranked, actually be 5-1, and they're going to be ranked. And if they can somehow beat South Carolina on the road, which won't be easy, they're going into their October 28th game against Georgia 6-1. And got some real momentum. And even if they lose that game, you're talking about a team that's 6-1. They've got Arkansas at home. They'd have Florida State at home, at LSU at Missouri. Could be a nice bounce back season for Florida based on what we've seen. Now, that's a lot of ifs, but I liked how his team responded to that season opening loss. They could have collapsed. I mean, there was a lot that I'm like, man, what the heck are we doing here? Well, this is terrible. So, and then of course, Washington State, which Ryan talked about this summer, as a staff he really liked. Washington State's doing a heck of a job. Really doing a nice job. And of course, what Deion Sanders has done at Colorado is, I mean, guys, I said if they go 6-6, he should be up for coach of the year. And they're already halfway there. They're 3-0. And the heart they showed against Colorado State, I was impressed by that. I was really impressed by that. And just the Pac-12 in general has got some staffs doing some really nice jobs. Chip Kelly's done a really nice job so far with UCLA. They're going to be tested this week against Utah. But like what they've done so far. And look, it's early and they haven't played anybody, but USC's defense looks better. I want to see them tested by a real offense, but you can only do what's in front of you, right? You can only play against what's in front of you. And so far what they've had in front of them has been, they've thrived against. They struggled early against San Jose State, but since then they've played very, very well, in my opinion, very well. And these last few questions I'm going to get to, because we got to get out of here. I'm going to start to lose my voice a little bit. And, so I don't want to do that. So just give me a second. I want to find find some good questions here. Here's one from USMA 87 hypothetical. Alt leaves for the draft. Fisher stays. Does Jagasol become the new left tackle, or does Fisher move to left tackle? I don't know that the next tackle would necessarily be Charles Jagasol. I could also see Charles Jagasol staying inside a guard and maybe beating out somebody at guard. I could see that, certainly. I would imagine in this scenario where if Charles Jagasaw is your next best tackle, let's assume that it's not Tosh Baker, who's currently the backup left tackle. Let's say Tosh doesn't come back and he's not the left tackle, which I could see. And Blake comes back. I could see if it's Emil Wagner, I could see Notre Dame doing one of two things. And I'm not sure which one I think is the better option. It's going to depend on how Blake plays the rest of the year. I'd say move Emil to left tackle, let him battle with Tosh Baker is what I would probably do right now. That's what I would probably do is move him, because I've not liked what I've seen from Blake so far this year, especially in pass pro. He's going to have to step up a lot in that regard. Now, if Blake finishes strong, then I'd say move him to left tackle and let him build his draft stock there. But the way he's played so far, I haven't loved what I've seen from Blake to where I would want to put him on the blind side of a quarterback, to be honest with you. He's going to have to get a little bit better. He's definitely going to have to get better. There's no doubt about it. All right. Question from Jack Johnson. Hey, Brian, I've only watched the All-22 film against NC State, and Indy right guard and center did not look good at all. Was that a one-game thing, or are they a weak link? I think it was a one-game thing. Rocco's still a young player. You watched his third career start. I think if you go back and watch that game, though, there were some blocks that Rocco did very well. It's just the bad blocks were bad. But the good blocks for Rocco have been very good. Against Central Michigan, we saw a lot more of the very good and not as many of the bad. He's got to just keep working his feet. Rocco's problem is he starts stopping his feet. I think Zeke's issues against NC State had a lot to do with just how the guards weren't playing well. I thought both guards didn't play well against NC State. Pat Coogan had a couple really nice blocks. The 80-yard touchdown run, Pat had a great pull and kick on that to open up Audric Estime's initial vertical entry. But who'd they run behind on that play? And they ran behind the right side of the line where Rocco is. So Rocco's just been up and down. He was a lot better against NC State or against Central Michigan. When I went and rewatched the game, Rocco had about 5 or 6 blocks. You're like, dude, if you can do that consistently, you're going to be really good. It's just he still gets himself in too many situations where he stops his feet. And that's kind of my thing with Rocco is you just got to keep him working your feet through contact. But again, he's a young player. And I saw some other comments that you made in the chat about, about Rocco and some, how he needs to be gone or whatever. I mean, look, you're assuming that somebody else has been better than he has. And I don't know that that's a safe assumption. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, well, because the head coach has decided this, that guy must be better. That's not really my style, but I think Rocco's done enough good in 4 starts that you say, hey, look, yeah, he's got to get better, but this guy's done some good things. And this guy's going to continue to be a guy that we're going to build and develop, because the thing that Rocco can do, and I'm just watching a play against NC State where it was the first run by Jadarian Price. Rocco pulls around. Guy comes off the edge. He kicks him out, takes proper angle, forces the guy to go outside. Jadarian cuts right inside of him. He's done some good things where it's like, if you can just give us that more consistently, then he's going to be a really good player, because Rocco can move people. He did a really nice job on Jadarian Price's 10-yard run where he saw the guy crashing in. He wraps the guy around, did a really nice job there. There was another run, Audric Estime's, I think, first carry of the second half. They're running power, and on that play, so I think it was Davis Sherwood. So they're blocking power. Davis is supposed to kick out. So Jack, if you're on the message board, you should have seen this. But they're running power to the left, and Davis Sherwood was supposed to kick out the edge, and then Rocco's going to pull around and get in between, that A and B gap as the wrapper. Well, the edge crashes down, and so Davis logs him. He gets outside of him, and Rocco reads it perfectly, comes around, has his eyes upfield, and sees the linebacker coming out, and he blocks him. He doesn't dominate, but he blocks him, gets good proper angle, takes the guy on, and Audric runs right inside of him for a 21-yard gain. I saw a lot more of that stuff from Rocco against Central Michigan. And then what Ryan and I talked about last week before the game, when you break down that game, the best part of their defense was their interior. So he did that against what is the best part of that Central Michigan defense. Now, it's not a great defense, but I thought Rocco was a lot better. And if he can just move his feet more consistently, but build on the Central Michigan game, he's not only going to keep a starting job, I think he's going to be pretty good. But he's going to have to do that, though, right? Like, that's going to be the key, is he's going to have to do that. Zeke Correll played very well against NC State. So, look, big picture, though, to your point, never make an assumption about who should or shouldn't start, or who is or isn't a great player or a good player or a bad player based on one game. I've said this to people before. If the only game you ever watched of Tom Brady was like, some of the couple of the playoff games against the Broncos that they lost, or the Super Bowl against the Giants, you'd probably like, this guy's the greatest of all time. I don't think so. You never make that impression off of one game. It's over the course of an entire season. What's he grading out as? Is he grading out at a high level? Is that just a bad game? Is he kind of doing that week after week? Those are all important things. And that's why I would say always use more context to create an opinion and an impression of a player. I think that's always wise. Always wise. Well, that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I've about run out of my voice. And so I can just kind of feel it going. So I'm going to go and not talk for a little while. But I appreciate you all being with us today. This was a lot of fun to be able to do a super chat. It's a lot of talking for just one guy. So I apologize I wasn't able to get to all the questions. I need to save my voice for tomorrow because we're going to be at the tailgate. So we're going to have our tailgate tomorrow at Stadium Lot. We're going to hope to get there around 1. I'll tweet out and put on the message board when we're going to be there and where we are. So I'll tweet out like what the poll number is in the parking lot. So definitely come join us. I'll be there from when it starts. I'll probably go into the stadium around 5:30, 6 o'clock at the latest. So I'll be there. Vince is going to hopefully get there around 2 o'clock. So we're going to have some fun tomorrow. So I need to save my voice a little bit. So when you guys are there tomorrow, we can talk and have fun, and you guys can ask questions, or we can just hang out, whatever. If anybody has like a TV situation, hit me up. We can always do that. And I'm still looking for a second parking pass in the stadium lot because I'd like a little bit more room there. So if you've got one and you're willing to sell it, hit me up on Twitter or shoot me a message on the board or email me at brian@irishbreakdown.com. So definitely check that out. So folks, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you've not already done so, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow for the post-game show. Hopefully some of you will see at the tailgate, but have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you again soon, and hopefully we're all in a good mood when we get together for the post-game show tomorrow night. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.